Okay, do I start? Are we ready for me? Okay, I didn't get that, the thumbs up. And good morning. Welcome to our second annual California Association's Bond Oversight Committee Statewide Conference, supporting Bond Oversight Committee through California legislative changes. First, I'd like to express our gratitude and appreciation to Moss Adams as our conference sponsor for the second consecutive year. Today, we have several topics to cover, starting with best practices on monitoring and oversight controls for K-12 bond programs. Next, CABOC legislation proposals for 2023 and the results of the CABOC compliance survey for 2021. Due to personal reasons, the presentation from Mr. Ethan Raddick, the Executive Director of the Little Hoover Commission, will not be included. At the end of this conference, we will be presenting our awards. For housekeeping, I go to Keith for his comments and directions. Take it away, Keith.
Good morning.
Andrea Ellison joined the meeting.
Good morning. My name is Keith Mueller, and I'm going to be working today as the admin for our conference today. We're going to not do this as a webinar, as a more of a larger conference, I would say. We're going to be basically doing a sort of an enhanced Zoom meeting. We'll try to keep mics muted. There's going to be a lot of people going to join this meeting, and we're going to use exclusively the chat feature in order to ask questions during this meeting. So please, you can use chat to chat with the hosts and co-hosts any questions you have, and that's how we'll figure out how to answer questions during the presentations. We'll even have Q&A sessions at the end of each presentation, so there's time for additional chats. We're recording this right now, so we'll also have any, if you have any questions that can be answered beyond the meeting, we'll try to eventually get around to all the questions that we have that have been shared in the chat as they are all being recorded. When you are watching this meeting, please then adjust your screen so you can see who's speaking, and make sure that if you're going up at the top of your Zoom meeting, you select speaker view so that you will see the person who's speaking as they're discussing their particular presentation. That's sort of the basics of it. The chat, again, is going to only go up to the hosts and co-hosts. You'll not be able to chat with everyone else, but that's okay, because then we'll be answering the chats from above and going back out again. Okay, I'm just going to keep an eye on everybody, make sure we all play nice, and hopefully we'll have a very good meeting today. So at this point, I'm going to then, get back into the general meeting, and I believe we're going to start off with our first presentation. We'll go back here. We'll get to Moss Adams at this very moment. We'll start off. So let me queue up for that, and we'll get going.
Well, thank you, Keith. So our first speaker, our first topic is best practice monitoring and oversight controls for K through 14 bond programs. And I hope that we have Mr. Stephen Brichetti, a partner with K-12 team. Is he on? If not, we've got Tammy. Hi, Tammy. So is Steve on right now? Oh, there he is. Hi, how are you? So it's up to you now. So we're ready to go whenever you are. Thank you.
Is Steve? Let me see here if he's.
It's on. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Steve, if you're talking, you're muted.
1 second. Let me see if I can. I think, where is he? There we go.
Can you hear me?
Now we got you.
Now we can.
Great. Good morning, everyone. We are so excited to be presenting today. It's been a crazy morning on my end. I had soccer coaching with a bunch of 4-year-olds, straight to CABOC, then straight to coaching 7-year-olds. But that's exactly how I'd like to spend my Saturday. So thank you to CABOC for allowing us to sponsor the event. We're really excited to discuss this topic with you today. And I'll pass it over to Tammy to kind of kick off the presentation. We'll do introductions and look forward to your questions at the end of the presentation.
Great. Thanks so much, Steve. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tammy Lohr, and I'm a senior manager with Moss Adams, and I help lead a lot of our bond program performance audits to both evaluate compliance and support the application of best practices to enhance transparency, accountability, and the appropriate use of funds to really think about how you're going to maintain trust with your community in the application of these resources. So we can go to the next slide. As Steve mentioned, we're really excited that you've all joined us this morning. Today we'll be covering a little bit more about our team before diving into specifics on how to effectively monitor and oversee bond programs in your role as a CBOC member, especially given some of the trending challenges that we've noticed for these programs throughout our work with a variety of clients in recent years. Next slide. All right. So a little bit more about our team. So our K-14 team works very extensively with capital programs in schools specifically. Every year we perform over 75 different projects that span project leadership, program management, capital program assessments, construction audits, change order reviews, process improvement projects, and of course, my personal favorite, performance audits. All of these projects are geared towards enhancing capital programs at your district and supporting efficient and effective processes so that you can best use the limited resources that are available to you as a public sector organization. So we look at things like policies and procedures for adherence to regulations like Proposition 39, Public Contracting Code, and then compare your practices to best practices. And since we work very extensively in this space, we have a number of best practices that we are able to draw on from a variety of different organization types and structures.
And I'll just add, just to piggyback off what Tammy was saying, our team is very unique in the sense that we both perform these assessments at various stages for capital programs, and we're actually able to support, execute the game plan depending on the scope. And what makes that very unique is we understand both sides of the equation. So our team involves performance audit leaders like Tammy, forensic experts and examiners, process improvement experts, people that just focus on policies and procedures, ex-construction project managers, ex-project engineers. So our team is extremely diverse, and we have a lot of really good perspectives collectively as a team. And the reason we've structured that way is we believe we're the most holistic service provider in this space in the market. So, yep. So we're looking forward to your Q&A, and I'll pass it back over to Tammy.
Great, and we can go to the next slide. So as Steve mentioned, we have this team that really focuses on capital programs and construction in school districts. Our team also, of course, specializes in audits that are specifically required for Proposition 39, which does include financial statement audits and any agreed upon procedures that you might need. Moss Adams did start as an accounting firm. We are much more of an advisory firm now, but this is still one of our core service lines as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we talk about best practices and bond program oversight, we wanted to have just a very quick refresher on Proposition 39. I'm sure that most of you are very familiar with this regulation. The proposition was approved by California voters in the year 2000 and requires that bond funds can only be spent on the specific projects listed in the ballot measure. It requires a 55% voter approval for a bond to pass and includes specific accountability requirements, including a financial statement audit and a performance audit be performed annually during the bond's life cycle. Go to the next slide, please. So what is a performance audit? Most people are pretty familiar with the concept of a financial statement audit, but might be less familiar with a performance audit. Performance audits are performed under generally accepted government auditing standards, essentially a subsection of the same standards that your financial statement audits are performed under. It's a specific chapter within that set of standards. And they're able to audit far more than just financial transactions. So they can look at things like compliance, such as compliance with Proposition 39 by only expending funds on projects that are listed in the ballot. Internal controls, such as having the appropriate approvals in place for expenditures. Program effectiveness and results. So that would be things like, are we completing the projects on time and within budget according to what we have communicated to our voters? Or perspective questions. One of those examples that comes up right now is thinking about what will the impact of inflation be on the overall cost of our capital program? How are we going to be able to stretch our funds and think about some of the trade-offs that we might need to be making? Performance audits can have any of these objectives or a combination of several of these objective types and rely on gathering sufficient and appropriate evidence to support findings. So why a performance audit? Performance audits are designed to provide objective analysis to help those charged with governance, which includes individuals on this call today, to improve operations, reduce costs, and strengthen internal controls. The goal is really to provide you with reliable information that you need to be able to effectively understand potential challenges and make informed decisions. The bare minimum of a performance audit under Proposition 39 requires a compliance review to ensure that funds were only spent on projects listed in the ballot, but an expanded audit can help give you far more information on how your district is achieving efficiency and effectiveness using the limited resources that you have available to achieve your goals. These audits can identify opportunities to enhance contracting practices, change order processes, communications with your stakeholders, and internal controls, depending on the types of objectives that you might want to consider. So when we're working with clients on an expanded performance audit, meaning that we are looking at more than just expenditure compliance, we're able to look at a variety of different things. And these are some of the examples of different areas that we're very well versed in and can provide additional value to our clients when we're doing these performance audits. The first area is procurement and contracting practices. So that would include looking at compliance with public contracting code, district policies and procedures, and identification of opportunities to enhance processes to align with best practices. The next area is the efficacy of public outreach and communication related to the bond program, including things like, what is our progress made to date? Are there any changes to our original plans? And the ability for stakeholders to track specific projects, since you do have a community that is invested in the condition of these facilities and seeing the progress that is being made with those funds. The next area is overall transparency of the bond program by looking at what information is available publicly and how it's organized and put out there to allow people in your community who are interested in a project or the program as a whole to understand exactly what's going on with it. We can also look at compliance with labor regulations, including prevailing wage and appropriate compensation practices, or verification of overtime that might be billed to the project. We also look at the performance and oversight of your CBOC. How are you all working together? How do you understand your role and manifest that role during meetings to effectively oversee the bond program? We can also review your bond program management plan, including things like staffing that is dedicated or allocated to the bond program, and how well you are adhering to design and construction timelines for the program, including comparing that to industry standards and current norms, since we know that those can be moving targets when there's been a lot of labor shortages and supply chain issues like there has been for the last 2 years. We can go to the next slide. So here are even more different areas that we can look at in an expanded performance audit, depending on the risks that you're seeing in your organization as well. So we can look at your project budgets, how you're using technology throughout the planning and construction process, how quickly you're able to process payments. We always want to see those payments processed in under 30 days to make sure that you're compliant with the Prompt Payment Act. And that's really important to get good contractors who want to work with you. They need the funds to be able to pay their employees and keep that project moving. And you have a critical role to play in making sure that they're able to do that. We can review your program and construction management structure. Again, thinking about who is charging their time for the project, is that allowable, and what are the costs associated with the structure that you've put into place? We can look at change orders and how they're approved and processed, which can be an area of high risk. I know Steve will be talking about that a little bit later in today's presentation. We can actually look at how you're delivering your construction programs, the pros and cons of the different models to get the best possible outcomes depending on the capabilities of your district. And Steve will also be talking about that. And then last but certainly not least, looking at how bond program proceeds are used to pay for district staff who are working on the bond program. So you might have individuals who are fully dedicated to the program or people who charge their time as they go. We like to make sure that we're double checking that and ensuring that the spirit of Proposition 39 and the ballot measure are upheld. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve to talk more about what types of challenges we often see in these bond programs and what you should be watching out for as an oversight body.
Great. Thank you, Tammy. So as background, during the 80s and 90s, California experienced tremendous population growth and demand for new schools and construction, as well as the need to modernize and repair and refurbish many of the schools that were built in the 1950s and 60s. So Prop 39 was intended to kind of really upgrade the facilities. And what we're seeing from that, some of the common K through 14 bond program challenges that we'll be focused on, the ones in bold today, are inadequate master planning controls, excessive requirements, and scope creep. So when you guys were doing the design plans, did you guys have all the considerations built in, or are you doing an owner initiated changes after construction starts, which is impacting or creating a lot of unnecessary change orders, overcharges and costly practices? So that could be a lot of things. Are you competitively procuring? Are you using the right contract types where you can, for example, like the guarantee maximum price contract, which we'll talk in at length later, where you can validate that the costs incurred are compliant and not excessive. And if any savings are available, it gets returned to the school district. Inadequate project financial records and reports. I think this is a huge area that we see a lot of districts struggle with, which we'll talk about more in detail, but really understanding the KPIs that we leverage GFOA, which sets the standard of best practice of how to report a capital projects so that you can early detect risk and put in controls in place so that if there is an area of risk that you identify it early on and you're able to take steps, corrective steps in a timely manner. Next, project and schedule delays, which we know, I think during COVID, this was for schools with school being hybrid or offsite. It was actually a way for the schools to increase the schedule significantly. However, as we know, the kids are back in school or it's hybrid where there's a lot more logistics involved. So having those considerations understood upfront is critical. Construction quality issues. So really understanding the material specifications log and requirements for your district, making sure that it's consistent across your entire portfolio of construction. For example, if you have HVAC systems or locks and they're differing per school sites, that can be very problematic from operations. So ensure that you have a consistent material specifications log that's being applied throughout the district is critical. And then for the quality of construction, when you're doing the punch list, making sure that it's meeting the quality, you have good project closeout control so that when the operations of the school come online, that you know it's good quality. Project funding not aligned with project plans. So I think what's critical here is you get the project plan, you get the funding established up front, you communicate with stakeholders, and you stick with it. And as the intent of Prop 39, as many of you guys know, it's how are there other ways that you can increase funding to maximize the use of the funds? So having those considerations, the reporting, those funds broken out and reported and prioritized in a strategic manner will help you and your school district. Unfavorable contract terms and controls. So we'll get into this a little bit later, but what contracts are you guys using? Are you doing T&M type jobs where a lot of risk are with those contracts if they aren't adequately supervised and monitored, or are you doing lump sum? If lump sum, are you competitive? Do you know that you're competitively procuring those? Or if it's GMP, do you have really good cost of work definitions to control and manage cost? Change orders, which is a big area. There's contract language you can do to provide more tools for school districts to audit change orders. I think change orders, making sure that they're fully substantiated, that they have good estimates, and it's not negotiated, that you really can understand what is supporting the change order, and that it's not and understand the nature of the change, right? So it could be a design error, it could be unforeseen condition, it can be an owner initiated changes. So it's really important when you have the change orders, understanding the nature of the change. And then if it's a design error, if you, for example, did a design build project, you potentially can push back on the contractor and the architect saying this isn't our change. Stakeholder perception issues, which is such a big issue in with any public construction. You can be executing the construction program perfectly, but if you're not managing stakeholders' expectations via, for example, master planning controls and updates, it can derail the success of your program. Project staffing. So we have a lot of organizations that they're in the business of conducting school, not construction. So when you get bond programs or have a capital program need, really understanding your team's expertise and capabilities, making sure that you're teaming up with trusted advisors, which may be third-party construction managers, or maybe in hiring internal staff to manage the job, or having expanded performance audits or other key parties such as legal to ensuring that you're staffed appropriately for the construction, the complexity of it, etc. Capacity of construction companies. As we know, there's a lot of construction going on, and there's a lot of issues in the construction industry, whether it's supply chain issues that Tammy noted earlier. So really understanding that the quality of the construction companies are good, understanding their financial statements and that they have the capacity to execute the construction plan is critical. Unfilled owner and occupant requirements, just making sure that you're scoping projects that are consistent with the need. As you know, some of your ballot language or bond measures were passed many, many years ago. Needs change throughout the process, so making sure that you have strong master planning controls to adjust those for those needs are critical. Property loss, we've seen this, some of it can be very preventable. If you have a new construction program that put a bunch of new materials in place, there's generally warranty compliant conditions. So making sure that your district is monitoring those warranty compliant conditions, so that if there is something that happens on that specific material or equipment item and it's under warranty, then you don't have to repay it twice. We've seen that as a common issue. And then claims and disputes. So early detection is critical, good contract terms is critical, and then really understanding the claim and ensuring that it's compliant, it's not excessive, and it's appropriate is critical. But we find a lot of times claims can be easily prevented with early detection measures, timely change order reviews, and trusted advisors to making sure that the claim is appropriate. But today we're focusing on master planning controls, reporting, and contract terms and change orders. Next slide, please. All right. So every program, every project has a very unique timetable. So really understanding where you're at is critical. So at a high level, when you get the bond program, you got to plan for it, right? You got to understand what you need. You got to ensure you have the funding alignment definitions there. You need to facilitate scope definitions, which should line up with the BOUT language, which will clearly identify what you're using. Preferably, you'll have the material specifications log so that you can answer questions saying, are we putting the Honda Civic building in, or are we doing the Lexus, right? You need to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what facility you're building, what the material specifications are, and if that is alignment and maximizing the use of the funds. Next, establish communication processes and progress meetings. So it is critical as a district and as an oversight committee member to know that when you get these bond programs, you need to make sure that you maximize it and communicate to key stakeholders. So having progress meetings with the district on current state, making sure that performance is being tracked appropriately, both budget, forecast, commitments, schedule, is critical to keep both the district on plan and then oversight aware of progress so they can report annually. Developing a master plan. So the BOUT language provides a great starting point to say, hey, what are we executing? But it's critical to develop a master plan that keeps everyone on track, to evaluate it annually for appropriateness. And then, as we all know, I know we see this at a lot of school districts. The BOUT language has a lot of different types of scopes and has a lot of different items as approved listed projects, but there's not potentially enough money to go around to serve all of it. So ensuring that you have a project prioritization process is critical. Next, programming, assessing the staffing model. So you need to look at this from a bond program status and a project specific status. So really understanding your expertise within your school district from a bond program management, and then also as an individual projects. Some that we see projects be hundreds of millions of dollars for a specific school. That may require a specific project manager in addition to a third-party construction manager, for example, to ensure that the project schedule is being met and the owner needs are being met as well. Apply best procurement practices. So in the public contracting code provides very clear definitions on ways to stay compliant with state law and regulations. However, there are things that you can also improve. For example, professional service contracts don't necessarily require 3 quotes per public contracting code. So ensuring that you have implementations in your policy for instances such as that will help you ensure that you're applying best practice procurement practices. And that can also be different contract type and project delivery methodologies. So for example, we see design, bid, build as a common use, and that might be appropriate for certain jobs, but really having the ability to do potentially a design build job with guaranteed maximum price contracts can be a superior construction delivery methodology with contract type selection to ensure that you're not paying more than you should. Defining the program structure and procedures. So this is kind of what we talked about, is you need to have the right team, and then you need to establish the right policies and procedures to keep people accountable so that if there are issues, you can hold them to the policy. So whenever you get a big program, making sure that your staffing model is appropriate, making sure that you have the right policy and procedure definitions to support the team. Building contractual controls. So we've talked about this, really defining when to use the certain contract types, when to use certain construction delivery methodologies so that you're able to utilize the best practice option for the specific project. Assessing project scheduling. This is critical. We had a story that happened a while ago that you had the facilities, and this is a common issue we see in a lot of schools and other organizations we work with. Facilities can be potentially a little bit siloed compared to the accounting operations, for example. They don't have good communication or reporting between the departments. So we had an instance where certain physical activity construction was expected to be completed in fall that supported sports, correct? But that schedule got delayed, and that was not being communicated from facilities to the operations of the school, which caused a huge disruption within the school. So really ensuring that you have the reporting and it's timely and being reported to the correct stakeholders is critical. Design. So what are you guys building? And making sure that you're using the best contract types for the design process. For example, AIA has very defined process and procedures, making sure that your terms align with that. That can help you go through the schematic designs in a very controlled environment, making sure that you got the right owner approvals as you had to design documents, making sure that it's getting the appropriate approvals. Key parties from the district and oversight committees are within that, making sure that you're building the appropriate specifications and as you go into construction documents. So these sessions are critical to really define the objectives and plans. And once you start construction, if you start changing plans, that's when the change orders occur. So it's critical to have those sessions early on to really define what you're building, which relate back to the bout language, which ties back in the master plan. Next, review and improve management, program management process and procedures. So you got policy procedures. Are they in line with best practices? Are people executing that plan per those best practices? So once you get a bond program, getting it set up is one thing, but constant monitoring is critical to ensure that people are executing the plan per the policies and the policies are consistent with best practice. Monitor design and planning performance. So again, it's construction is just as important as design planning process. So you can set up similar reporting metrics for construction as you can for design, making sure it's going through best practices, it's progressing as it needs to, key input is provided at the appropriate times. I'm sure many of you guys have seen this. Their design can go over budget. So if you don't have the good contract controls or performance monitoring controls, design can be just as risky as construction potentially. And then as you head into construction, you're monitoring program progress and quality. So this kind of ties back to reporting. So are you progressing towards the established metrics set up at commencement of the bond program? If not, I think a lot of people understand construction happens. There's a lot of variability to it, but are you communicating that to the appropriate stakeholders? Review cost measurement and payment controls. So here, if you have guaranteed maximum price contracts, you can have really strong cost of work definitions, making sure that people are billing only compliant cost and who's reviewing that. Other components, if it's a lump sum project, is percent complete correct. So a lot of you guys earn interest on proceeds from bond funds. So making sure that you're having the percent completes reviewed for appropriateness, or if it's a guaranteed maximum price, that the cost is compliant so that you're not overpaying and you're collecting that interest. Next, verify construction program operational compliance and financial controls. This is what we've kind of been communicating. Once you've set up shop, you have good policy procedures, constantly analyzing your processes, your staffing models for alignment with best practices, looking for inefficiencies or disconnects is critical. There's a lot of change that can occur within a bond program. A lot of staffing can change. Staffing for not only the district, but the oversight or the construction company. So constantly monitoring that can make sure that you're executing and implementing your bond program according to plan. Audit contractor records and change order financial or audit contractor cost records, change orders, financial budgetary reporting and control processes. We've covered this at length. Safety program. So safety is critical on all construction. If there's an injury that is going to impact potentially schedule and cost. So making sure that your contractors have a good safety plan and you take that seriously is important for your program. Next, closeout and completion, evaluate your program results against targets. So if a lot of you guys with bond programs, you have a lot of construction in the pipeline. So constantly looking at, hey, we just completed this project. What went well? What didn't go well? How do we improve? So not everyone does construction perfectly, and that's okay. But learning from your mistakes is critical. So as you do your bond programs and your projects, it's critical to constantly look back, saying, how do we improve? What worked? What didn't work? How do we adjust our game plan so that we execute the next project more efficiently and effectively. Final project audit cost. This is great, but we really like early detection of potentially non-compliant cost on a guarantee maximum price contract, for example. But doing a closeout audit, making sure that you have all those adjusted for is critical. Capture learning for improvements, which I just noted. Again, it's super critical when you finish a project, huddling up with the team. That's going to include the district, include the contractor, it can include the CBOC, and making sure you say, hey, what went well, what didn't well, how do we improve in the future? And then performed independent and balanced assessments. So this can be from an outside party doing performance audits. This can be from the CBOC. This can be from other people within the district, so that you get kind of a objective look at your program and you're saying, hey, are we on track? Are we not on track? How do we get better? Okay, so for bond program master planning, we like the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association. We find it's a great criteria to evaluate capital planning policies and procedures. We also like San Diego Taxpayers Association, which has a lot of good guidance on reporting. So per the GFOA, bond program master planning policies provide an essential framework for managing tasks and assuring the plans are consistent with the project list and overall organizational goals. So when you have your policies, this could look like it will include stuff such as the description of how stakeholder departments will collaborate. So how does your facilities department interface with your finance, which interfaces with your operational and IT, for example? A description of the role of the public and other external stakeholders in the process. So really defining what the CBOC is doing, for example, what the community's doing, what end users, for example, like a principal is doing within the process, so that you have that all defined so people understand their roles and responsibilities so that you can constructively communicate. Identification of how decisions will be made in the planning process. So it goes back to that prioritization policy or matrix, is there's more projects you have to do than funding. That's almost going to be a given. So really defining how you're going to prioritize needs will be extremely helpful when you don't have enough money to do potentially all the things on the project list, that you have a framework to say, hey, this is how we're prioritizing scope. This is how we scored it. This is how it rolls up. Provisions for monitoring and oversight of the bond program, including reporting requirements on and how to handle changes and amendments to the plan. So like we've noted before, changes are going to happen. Your needs are going to change. Some of these bond programs are over several decades, for example. So really ensuring that you have good master planning policies and procedures. So as changes need, you have that framework to say, hey, the budget is not sufficient to cover all the needs. These are our updated scope priorities. This is our framework for getting key input. This is how we update the plan. Percent of project complete, percentage of project budget expended. So having that framework of saying, hey, this is current state. It needs, we find a common issue with districts is they only look, in other organizations, they may only approve budgets yearly, but you really, for construction, have to look at the bond program in total and then projects in total, and those have different phasing. So really understanding where the projects are at, what's left over, is there enough to execute the original game plan? If not, how do we prioritize it? How do we adjust budgets to meet our stakeholders' needs? Next slide. Okay, reporting. This is huge. So really having a good understanding of percent of the project completed, percent of the project budget expended, progress on key project milestones, contract status, including what's remaining, revenue, expenditure activity, cash flow and investment maturities, making sure that you have the funding necessary to meet the requirements, funding commitments, and available appropriations. So if we take a step back, what we really like seeing within bond programs is both summary and detailed information available. We like real-time data where potentially utilizing software systems such as like Domo or Tableau or other types of technology options where you can pull data real time. And that could interface with both your accounting software systems and potentially construction software systems like Prolog, which can help manage project schedule, et cetera. So when you have that real-time reporting available, and you have the KPIs such as budget, project forecast, commitments, expenditures, and a short detail of, hey, these are the milestones of where we're at, whether it's in design or construction, that serves as a critical item to promote accountability and transparency, not only with the district, but with the stakeholders. So when you go back to your districts, really looking at the reporting and saying, hey, are we getting the information that we need real time? Do they have the KPIs that we need to really kind of understand the project's the project status or the bond program status? If it's not there, then I think the GFOA is a great criteria to say, hey, this is best practice. How do we get the best practice? And maybe the district may not understand that these are kind of the best practice KPIs, or maybe they're having staffing shortages where maybe a technology solution proposal may be a good fit for that specific program. Next slide, please. So a couple extra measures, comparison of results. So this can both be financial, schedule, quality data, highlights of significant changes to project scope, cost, schedule, or funding. So generally, if you're mid-project, we don't like seeing significant project scope changes. That means something happened in the planning stages that probably could have been approved, but it does happen. So if you do have those types of changes, really having clear definitions on, hey, this was original budget, this is what changed, we're within the 10% limitation of PCC, so we're compliant on that end, and really having that good reporting so people can understand why budget changed. And we find that when you have this level of detail and it's real time and it's communicated transparently, it helps bridge the gap. We've seen many districts, and Tammy can attest to this, when it's not reported correctly, even if it's by the book, it may not appear that way to key stakeholders. So making sure the district is reporting best practice, they're transparent in terms of changes to project scope, it may be very justifiable, but when you have these KPIs, it triggers those types of discussions so that people can clearly understand, hey, we had changes because of XYZ. It may have been supply chain issues. It could have been other factors, but really having the itemized detail and transparency at both the project and those project rolling up to the bond program level are critical. And then confirmation of continued availability. There's been many instances where we get involved at the very end and they're like, we have no money to complete our construction projects. Then they find out once there's no more money in the bank. So it's critical when you're doing these, the reporting for your bond program is really understanding current state. So what's the budget? What's the forecast? What's been committed? What's the original budget for this bond program? And do we have the cash flow and cash needed to execute the plan? And it could be the plan could have been executed perfectly and maybe supply chain issues increase cost. We see that all the time, but having that early detection allows the district to say, hey, we need more funds. Do we get more funding from a bond, another bond? Do we have other pockets within the general fund that can maximize the use of funds? But it's critical to identify these gaps early on so you have time to evaluate the best potential option for your school. All right, contract types, strategies, and controls, everyone's favorite topic. So I'll just kind of go over the different contract types. You have lump sum, which means it's stipulated, you agree to it, it should be competitively bid. Time and materials, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's based off time and materials. We like having rates or actual cost definitions established upfront. Time and material can be risky for districts absent good controls over what they're doing, very clear definitions on scope and management controls. If it's not managed appropriately, time and materials can get excessive, consistent with cost plus. So our favorite contract type is the guarantee maximum price contract. It involves generally key stakeholders early on in the project, including the architect, the contractor, and the design build environment, so that you flush out design errors collaboratively as a team, so that when you get into construction, the guarantee maximum price is exactly that. It's going to be the maximum price. And if it comes in under budget via good operations from the contractor or good cost of work definitions, and you were able to manage costs tightly, then those savings could be provided back to the district, or potentially a savings clause incentive for the project team, because a happy contractor and owner relationship is important for bond programs. A right to audit clause. So we love seeing these in guarantee maximum price contracts. It allows school districts to evaluate, hey, were the costs incurred and billed to the district compliant with the contract terms? Were they excessive? Right to audit clauses are great, but they're only as good as your cost of work definition. So really ensuring that you get legal or a certified construction auditor to evaluate your contract and cost of work definitions is critical. And we have another slide later on that we can kind of go further in depth on that. We like in right to audit clauses, no audit scope limitation. So we don't say one audit, we say audits. We like transparency when we do these types of projects. So really having the ability to review cost records at any point of the construction project is very helpful for the school district. Requiring all supporting documentation upon request within reasonable amounts of time is helpful, so that you can say, hey, yeah, we were billed this and they incurred this and this is all appropriate. And this can be a great tool for both owners and contractors to increase accountability, transparency, and collaboration. Some of our biggest clients are contractors. So that's normally something that people find very unique, but we find the cost of work definitions for guarantee maximum price contracts can be a very critical tool to have both parties agree on, hey, this is a compliant cost, this is how we're going to bill it. And that allows both sides to really understand what's going to be incurred, and it avoids the surprises at the end. So a good example of this is if a lot of guarantee maximum price contracts say labor costs are allowable. People will have differing opinions on what labor costs could mean. That could mean potentially bonuses. It could mean rates versus actual cost. It could mean different type of burden components. So really having those clear definitions up front within the contract terms supports accountability, transparency, and collaboration with all project stakeholders. Next slide. All right, for change orders, everyone's biggest risk or biggest thing that keeps them up at night. So the normal process for change orders is you get a request for information, you get a change order request, and then you get the change order. What we really like seeing whenever change orders are provided, it is fully itemized. So it's more than one or two sheets of saying what it is. It's really defining everything that's included within that change order. The nature of the change, like we noted earlier, is critical. If it's not owner initiated, there's generally areas where you can push back and say, hey, this was in the design documents, this is not a change. So really understanding the different root causes of a change order and ensuring that if it is pushed to you, the nature is appropriate for the school district, and then making sure that it's itemized. And what we also like seeing is the change order is approved by the owner, architect, and general contractor. So the architect and engineer can be very important in this process, saying, yeah, this was a design error, for example, and this is partially appropriate change order for the school district, or maybe, which we like early detection of this, if the owner is changing design plans mid-construction, that you get those reporting capabilities saying, hey, changes are being made to design, is that appropriate? Is the cost justification worth it, so that you can early detect potentially those types of decision making processes, saying, hey, how do we go backwards to the design and planning phases to prevent owner initiated changes? So we really like seeing the nature of the change order reported and the appropriate sign-offs on there. And generally, you shouldn't be paying for subcontractor, GC, or architect and engineer errors or damages. So we see this often where there's something damaged on construction, and it creates a change or a schedule impact, and they try pushing the change order to the district. If you have good cost definitions within your contract terms, this should provide the school enough tools to say, no, this isn't our cost. This was an error provided by you. Here's the contract clause that prevents this being a allowable charge for the district. Okay, so I love this slide. So this provides the different cost types within a construction contract. On the left side, these are the different risks for that cost type, and the good controls are defined on the right side. So this is primarily applicable for guaranteed maximum price contracts. So for labor overcharges, to prevent that, and this can be for both project and bond program management type charges, is you want detailed timekeeping, like a time card, and you want appropriate review controls over those timekeeping records, whether it's the bond program or the project specific, if you have the right to audit clause. So having those monitoring controls and reviews done by the appropriate parties can help detect and control costs. Excessive change order costs is a common risk. So as we just went through it, making sure that your planning and design phases, architectural agreements are following best practices that are defined like in AIA. You have the right controls in place at that point. You're not changing design plans after construction has started, can help you push back on a lot of change orders and making sure that they're fully itemized and auditable. Cost management issues and surprises. So making sure that you have detailed reporting from the project and bond program at a total level, and then really going to the source data at the contractor level, ensuring what the estimates are, where are we at percent complete, are we hitting the key milestones per the construction schedule, etc. Excessive rental equipment cost. So rental costs can be kind of two factors. You have the third party and you have the contractor owned equipment. So when you have these mega projects, there's going to be equipment on site. So really understanding what those pieces of equipment are going to be. Is it cheaper to buy it or lease it? And if you're leasing it, it's okay if the contractor is using their equipment or third party, but really understanding what the rental rates are, what's the fair market value for that piece of equipment, having potential thresholds on rental rates cannot exceed those fair market value thresholds, so that they can prove out that you should be renting it, not buying it. And not necessarily that you want a bunch of construction equipment on a school site, but some maintenance departments, so you're really maximizing the fund. Excessive contractor costs and overpayments. So like what we said before, having strong cost to work definitions. Can you guys still hear me? I got a pop up on my screen that internet connection got.
Yeah,
I think
you went out for a second, but you're back.
Okay. I think my internet got sleepy with cost to work definitions. So, okay. Next, hidden contractor profit centers. So what we find, if you do the guarantee maximum price with strong cost to work definitions, it really removes the hidden profit centers, really has defined profit centers, which is okay. Right? We're okay with contractors making profit, but we want to make sure that they're not making too much. So really having strong cost to work definitions with clear profit centers keeps everyone happy. Unallowable charges. So this can be both at the bond program level and at the project level specifically. So constantly monitoring what costs are being incurred by the school district and the project level, and making sure that it's appropriate with the ballot language and then the contract terms. Overbilled subcontractor costs. So this could be where they at on their schedule. This could be, do they have strong contract terms at the sub level? We just did a project this week where subcontractors didn't have defined contract budgets and they went over budget, right? So if you, at the contractor level, making sure you have a good understanding of the sub level or potentially the sub level, making sure they're all defined contracts, there's competitive subcontracting bid procedures so that it rolls up competitively and controlled. Excessive insurance costs. So within your construction projects, that you likely have general liability insurance, potentially CSIP insurance, builder's risk insurance, subguard insurance. So really understanding what insurance products are being charged, not only within the cost of work definitions, but that are needed to support the project. For example, subguard insurance is a common insurance product we see on many projects, and maybe it's appropriate based off whatever the risk profile you guys are trying to manage, but really ensuring that the rates are stipulated. It's being applied at a competitive rate and it's utilizing the correct cost basis. So we had a recent project where subguard insurance was being applied on the total contract sum, not the subcontract values. So if you take a step back, they applied, and this was per the contract. The contract had the application on the wrong cost basis. So that resulted in a couple $1 million of excessive charges on a insurance product that was being applied on the contract sum, not the contract subcontractor level. So really understanding insurance and rates is critical to preventing overcharges. Okay, so the bond oversight committee, just kind of going over what are you guys here to do? So in summary, we can go through this in detail, but it's really to inform the public on the district's expenditures of the bond revenues. It's to actively review and report on the proper expenditure of taxpayers' money for the school district, and to produce and present an annual report to summarize the committee's findings, proceedings, and activities within the prior year. And I think the other critical point here is making sure that, to Tammy's point earlier, on really understanding at the district level who's charging their time and making sure that it's directly for the projects and that no funds are being used for teachers or admin salaries and other school operating expenses that are not appropriate based off the ballot language. All right, so here are some best practices that you guys can be doing: receiving and reviewing copies of the annual independent performance audits and independent financial audits, and understanding the differences. So a lot of performance audits don't have the expanded objectives. The minimum requirement within the state of California is making sure that the expenditures equal the ballot language. That's the minimum requirement. We like the expanded performance audits. As we know, the expenditures could be compliant, but they may be excessive, right? So like if you aren't using best construction delivery methodologies or best construction types, or you're not managing change orders and schedule, there could be excessive charges within those expenditures, right? But technically from the performance audit, that would be compliant, but we know that there was costly practices built in there. So we like the expanded performance audits or other types of performance tracking metrics, which can be an auditor or outside advisor saying, hey, are we doing this efficiently? Are we doing this effectively? Are we complying with PCC? Are we applying best practices? Are our process and procedures optimal? So really having those tools at the oversight committee level, understanding, hey, are these compliant? Yes. Are we being efficient and effective with the bond proceeds? Yes. Next, inspecting school facilities to ensure bond revenues are expended. So this is a great kind of tool for oversight committee members to do meetings, see what's being built, look at progress, look at project status reporting. So if your project status reporting are saying, yeah, we're all good, we're going to be delivering the gymnasium by fall, and you go take a walk in the summer and it's They haven't even started construction, there's a problem. So I think you guys can provide a critical tool saying, hey, is this progressing as the progress reports that were being provided? Is it all looking reasonable? Receiving and reviewing copies of any deferred maintenance. So really understanding what are the deferred maintenance items, what are the quantities, reviewing master plan, making sure potentially you need to prioritize scope for immediate needs, that it's compliant with the ballot language, you're prioritizing it appropriate from the policy procedures, you're communicating to stakeholders. So deferred maintenance is a great tool for oversight members to say, hey, are we using the funds compliantly, and are we maximizing the benefit for the school with these bond proceeds? Reviewing efforts by the school or community college district to maximize bond revenues by implementing cost saving measures. So this could be informing them or educating them on contract type selections. It could be looking for different revenue sources to maximize the funds. It could be identifying opportunities, saying, hey, HVAC, we need across all of the schools. Let's procure not school by school, but go wide to reach the best value. So we find oversight members can be just as critical as the district on identifying these opportunities, communicating constructively so that you support a successful bond program. All right, a request list. So us auditors, when we get engaged to do the expanded performance audits, these are kind of the request items we're looking for to get current state. We're looking at facilities organizational chart. Who's on the team? Is it third party? Is it all school district? What does the governance structure and roles and responsibilities look like? Master planning. When did you last do it? If you haven't done it for 10 years and you're still operating, you may need to update it. Let's take a deeper look there. Program policies and procedures. This can be both at the school level district on who's doing what, and it can be if you have a third-party construction manager supporting the district, what are their policy procedures? Does that line up with what you guys are doing? Are there proper controls over those third-party providers? Staffing plan. This can be both at the bond program level and at the construction level. So consistent with your org structure, what's the plan? We've seen school districts that they don't use third-party providers and they go internal, and that can potentially be excessive. So really understanding your staffing plan, making sure that it's competitive, making sure you have policies to evaluate the competitiveness of it so that you are staffed appropriately for the level of construction you guys have.
And I would just add that when we're thinking about who on the district is really involved in that team, it's important to also understand what are their sort of capabilities, because school districts are in the business of educating students, right? And so you may have great facilities people that have run these large capital programs and all in other districts or in other industries, but you also may have people who haven't done that before. And so just thinking about their experience and what they're really able to bring to the table. And that's where the expanded performance audit could also be helpful as well, to have us come in and sort of say, okay, here are some of the best practices that you can think about implementing, and provide all those sort of tools and materials for them to be able to enhance the program. So just another note about sort of who's involved in this capital program oversight.
100%. So we see that all the time where you'll have a school or a hospital get a bond program and they don't put the right team or advisors with the right experience, and they can potentially fall into the common pitfalls that we've talked about. Like it could be a change order, it could be change in design plans, not understanding that once you start construction, that's not the time to start doing scope sessions. So we see it all the time of not having the right team in place and having it roll up with good policy procedures, governance, roles, defined roles and responsibilities. Performance tracking. So we love seeing what the district's doing internally and how they're reporting it to the CBOC. So we have the GFOA, which we kind of reported today, that you can point to as great criteria of how to review and assess a capital program. San Diego Taxpayers Association also has really good criteria as well. So making sure that your reporting is consistent with that. If it's not, it could be a good opportunity for you to talk with your district saying, hey, this is San Diego Taxpayers Association, or here's GFOA. Here are some best practice KPIs that we're not seeing on our report. Is this possible for us to get on this? So we find having that constructive collaboration with the district is great, so that you guys can perform your function in the oversight role. And maybe you might be able to say, hey, we're not doing milestone or design planning reporting. This would be a good tool for the district, and it may be beneficial for them to be evaluating the project at that state. Expenditure reports. So this is just, what are the cost centers? What's the expenditures hitting the bond program? Labor reporting. Who's getting charged to the bond program? Are their roles appropriate? Is their time fully supported by time cards? Purchase order log. So we love these. We like seeing commitments on best practice KPIs, but what are the commitments? Where are the commitments at? So percent complete, and having a good old fashioned purchase order log can identify a lot of progress or potentially detect some risk. The CBOC website. So we love seeing the CBO website with who's on the committee, annual reports, meeting minutes, progress reporting. So we like seeing items such as that are aligned with best practice and requirements to support transparency with the community. And then sampling contracts, change orders, expenditures, and labor charges. So when we do these audits, we're looking at contracts, we're looking how they're procured, how they're managed in the design, construction phase, potentially, how change orders are being evaluated, what are the contract terms to support the change orders allowability, are the nature of the changes being reported in a way that are meaningful for the district to mitigate and detect potential not alignment with best practices, expenditures, are they allowable or not allowable, and labor charges. And then a check register report. Were these amounts paid? Right. So we did a construction audit not that long ago where we were asking for payment registers at the GC level, and we were finding that they weren't paying the subs, but they were getting paid. So a good old fashioned check register is a good way of saying, hey, are we paying our vendors timely? If not, what is the reason? It could be an operational issue. It could be a bigger issue. So really understanding the payments, are they aligned with the invoices? Are they being paid timely? Is a great practice. And then some of the benefits of an expanded performance audit. We are obviously biased because we live in this world, but every program we go to, we always have an area where we can say, hey, you can improve here, you can optimize here, you can get more transparency here, or consistency through policy procedures. So really engaging an outside professional that focuses on capital programs. It can be a performance auditor, it can be other party. But I think the benefit of the performance audit, we have to conduct ours under GAGA standards. So there's a not only a CPE requirement, but a reporting methodology to support transparency. And the benefits of a performance audit, it can early detect, it can provide project economy efficiencies and cost controls. It can prevent and detect early issues going on. It can validate compliance with public contracting code and competitiveness of procurement and contract type procedures. It can tighten up internal controls and project controls. As you know, the bond programs can be multi-million, multi-billion dollars. And if you're off by 0.1%, it can be millions of dollars. So really engaging an outside stakeholder that are looking at the expanded performance audit elements can really result in significant cost savings. Reduction in errors and overcharges, improved communication. So as I noted before, we've seen many times districts are executing their plan perfectly, but their communication with stakeholders is not. So making sure that you get an outside party saying, hey, we're seeing these disconnects. This is what we see works. Here's criteria that's best practice, can help kind of bridge the gap and promote kind of collaboration amongst the key parties. A continuous an evolution towards a continuous improvement. So sometimes people perceive auditors of kind of like gotcha moments, and that's not how these should be interpreted. Really, the performance audit is a tool saying, hey, this is how we can improve. This is what you did well this year. This is what's still outstanding. This is where you guys need to go, and this is how you're going to get there. So the performance audit can be a very helpful tool, making sure that, hey, this is the current state. Here's some areas we need to work on, and then this is how we improve, to kind of promote the constructive dialogue with the district and the CBOC, and then protection of stakeholder funds. So having these expanded performance audits, someone that's independent outside of the program, evaluating the program based off best practices and good criteria, helps identify early issues which can protect the stakeholder funds. So we are fans of performance audits. And that brings us to questions.
Well, I want to thank Steve and Tammy for outstanding presentation. I'm Anton Younghair. I'm the Executive Director of the California Association of Bond Oversight Committee. I'm going to be managing the questions. We have a variety of questions. We'll not be able to get to all of them because we're going to have to end at 11:30 to keep on schedule, but we'll answer as many as we can. And any questions we do not answer during this period, you can go to our website, bondoversight.org, and on the help desk, you can ask us any question, and we'll answer all the questions that are submitted to the website. Steve, the first question I have, the bond lawyer who advises the College of San Francisco determined that the language of the $845 million bond measure from 2020 should not have a list of specific bond projects. And this determination was made based on a court decision. So how does the performance auditor determine whether a project is in the project list?
That is a great question that I'll attempt to take a crack at. We're not lawyers. So, but what we like is transparency and accountability. We really like defined project list for the district's protection and from an oversight, transparency, and CBOC perspective. So if you have bond funds that are being provided by the taxpayers and that community, we see it as a total win to say, hey, this is what we're going to build. This is our plan. Here's our master planning policies, procedures. This is how we evaluate and prioritize scopes of work. And you have that formalized framework. So as needs change, which they do, we see that on many of these bond programs that last over decades, that you have a framework that you can say, this is best practice. This is our framework. This is how we adjust for changing needs, so that you can keep transparency and accountability to the stakeholders, and you have that reporting mechanism to report, so that the CBOC, when they do their annual reports, can say, yes, we're meeting the plan, we're meeting the expectations, we're meeting the needs of the community through the bond program. So yeah, we like lists, and we like defined scopes, and we like strong master planning, policy procedures, and performance tracking against that.
And we've certainly encountered that before, where there's been a project that bond funds were used for, and we couldn't quite tell based on the ballot language whether that was allowable or not. And we just report that there's a question and a determination needs to be made. But we at least elevate that within our report to point it out to those who are charged with governance, that there's a question here that does need to be determined.
Thank you. Next question. Can employees working on the bond projects be paid from the bond?
Yes. So there's clear definitions on what is an allowable project labor type and what is not, and what the nature of that labor, of the roles and responsibilities of that person are. So if they have a good title, but they're not working on the bond program, not allowable. So you really got to understand the project type, their roles and responsibilities per their job description. When you do the interview, discuss what they are performing. If it's directly for the project, it should be consistent with the state law.
And that's one of the components that we think about with an expanded performance audit is we're able to go through and look at who is charging labor to the project that might be internal to the district and validate that those charges are appropriate based on their role and their involvement in the bond program.
Next question. By law, does the school district require to get the Independent Citizens Bond Oversight Committee involved during the master planning process?
I don't think it's a law, but we do think it's a best practice that you engage, the school district has those master planning policy procedures. They have that framework and scope facilitation discussions with key members of the community, the school, the bond oversight committee. We find engagement from the oversight and community is a great thing for both the school and everyone involved. Really getting we find there's a lot of oversight committee members that have awesome experience. They are interested in the CBOC because that was maybe how they spent their career. So we see it as a total value add to engage, really define, again, through the master planning policy procedures, the engagement, the appropriate times, defining the roles and responsibilities of those parties so that when you are compiling your master plan and scope definitions that you're making, obviously you can't make everyone happy with that, but if you have that framework, that prioritization, that the scoring kind of matrix and framework up front, you can at least understand why the decision was made, which we like just from a transparency and accountability standpoint.
Thank you. As a member of an independent committee, how do I hold the school district accountable for questionable practices or sensitive financial issues related to construction bids, process, and change orders?
So I would recommend a performance audit. Expanded would be a great tool to kind of identify those specific process and procedures. I think having a good understanding of what it was, and I think having constructive communication with the district saying, hey, like we'd like to see 3 bids, for example, or ensuring that the right contract delivery methodologies are being applied and contract type selection is being made. Again, sometimes we go to school districts and they're just not aware of these because they don't have a good team around them. So I find having constructive dialogue in this space, having expanded performance audits or reporting to key stakeholders is a great tool to say, hey, these are practices that were done. This is how we can improve to better use the funds that are being provided.
And one of the benefits of having a performance audit is that it is being done under those audit standards. So there's very little opportunity for someone to say, oh, that's not really what happened. Of course, we had all of these bid documents, you just didn't see them. That's not going to happen in a performance audit. We're going to get all the information that we need and report on potential deficiencies. And the fact that you have a third party that did this work under very specific standards will potentially elevate those concerns to the appropriate level and make sure that they're being addressed. And again, it's really important to have that third party involvement, just from even a community trust building perspective, because your reputation could easily be tarnished. And it's really important to think about how we're protecting the school district's reputation as we're thinking about, okay, we've identified a concern here. We need to implement these recommendations to show taxpayers that we are good stewards of public funds.
Next, her question. I heard Tammy mention that bond funds under Prop 39 can be used for school upgrade and renovations. Can you please elaborate?
Sure. So you can use bond funds for any of the projects that are listed in the ballot, and those could include renovations, upgrades, seismic retrofits. Anything that was in that list is totally fair game. And that's what we're doing is in the bare minimum performance audit, we're going through looking at expenditures and making sure that those expenditures aligned with whatever the projects that were listed in that ballot measure.
Next question, can you comment on the process for reevaluating project lists based on analyzing the impact of construction inflation?
Great question. So yeah, I mean, we're in an environment of a lot of inflation, a lot of supply chain issues, costs are increasing, labor costs are increasing. So within the master planning policy and procedures in framework, having updated estimates for your bond program and project is extremely important. Especially as we know that bond programs generally it's limited, right? And your needs are potentially infinite. So really having a good understanding of the updated forecast and estimates for projects and future needs is critical, making sure that you have early detection of running out of funds potentially, or not being able to get to certain projects. So when you have your master planning policies and framework, having that constant evaluation of, hey, if costs are going up, how are we estimating these? Are we going to have the appropriate amount of fundings to meet our needs?
Yeah, master planning is really your key to really thinking about how are you prioritizing projects if the dollar amount associated with them changes, which certainly has happened over the last 2 years.
Please talk about how conflicts are resolved when a district challenges some of the change orders or the construction team insists on their validity. Is it entirely a matter of negotiations? These are not necessarily public discussions.
Right. So I think for schools, what we like seeing is within the contract language is having real debt. They'll work with their lawyers and bond counsel, but having good audit rights, right to audit clauses within their contracts that define what is a change order. How do you substantiate a change order, and having the ability to audit that change order to cost is a great practice. So I think from a audit standpoint, we like seeing the right to audit clause, really strong definitions around what is how do you substantiate a change order, and then working with the contractor and architect on when they submit change orders to you, the nature of the change. So if it's a design error or a repair and damage that was conducted on the job site, having your team kind of evaluate the nature of the change and saying, hey, was this owner initiated? Is this an appropriate change for the district, or are the contract provisions supportive of this not being a district charge? So I think having an understanding of the contract language.
Thank you. There's a question, can we access the recording? The answer is yes. There's also a question, I'd like to get a copy of the PowerPoint that'll be available.
Controls around change orders, making sure that change orders are fully substantiated and that the root cause is defined with the appropriate sign-offs.
Okay, I think I talked over you.
I think my internet cut out again. It needs some more coffee.
So the recordings will be available and the PowerPoints will be available. Can you explain how a CBOC can use ongoing purchase orders list to keep track of project progress? Great
question. So I'll take a first crack, and I know Tammy is awesome with reporting, but within the GFOA KPIs, we like commitments being a specific component of the report so that you can see budget, forecast, commitments, so that you can early detect if the commitments are in excess of budget or forecast, that's a problem. So I think a purchase order log is generally a very common report or easily run report for the school. I think having it set up in a way that can distinguish on bond program is beneficial from a efficiency standpoint for the district if they're trying to create best practice KPIs and reporting. But yeah, I think the purchase order log is a very strong reporting tool to say, hey, what's been procured? Is there a budget? Do those budgets line with the contracts? Is this within the total bond program budget?
Yeah, you just want to work with your staff at the district to make sure that the report is understandable, that you're not just getting a random log and trying to figure out which project is this purchase order relate to, or which projects. Again, if we're thinking about if we're renovating HVAC systems in 3 schools, we might have one PO for that rather than 3 separate POs. And then you're taking advantage of economies of scale, which is a great thing. So again, it's working with your district staff to really understand what are the budget to actuals on each of the project and the program as a whole.
Can a project audit be paid for by bond funds, or must it be paid for from general funds?
I would talk with bond counsel. We've seen both ways. We're not, we normally don't get too involved in that interpretation. But I think if it's directly supporting the bond program, we generally see bond counsel making a case that it's directly for the benefit of the bond program. But we would work with the bond counsel to confirm that it's aligned with counsel.
It is a requirement for the bond to have the financial and the performance audit. And so because it's an inherent requirement, we can often see it come out of the bond funds, but not necessarily.
Are districts required to disclose all costs per a voter approved construction bond?
So I don't know if there's specific guidance in that area, but we do think that it's a good practice for, if we look at the tools that are defined in the law, I don't think it clearly says all invoices, all contracts, all change orders. So I think what we find works the best is having reasonable requests from the district on these types of reports or sampling thereof. The performance audit can be a tool. We get this data when we do our procedures. We ask for the total cost population for that year. We do a sample selection statistically to make our sample selection. We find a lot of school districts, they're more than happy to kind of provide that same level of detail to the bond oversight committee. Just be mindful of kind of the staffing. Maybe they may have some staffing shortages issues, but I think having reasonable requests and good reporting that you can say, hey, yeah, the reports are reliable. We did a sample on kind of the cost report data to ensure that rolls up from a job cost, labor distribution, or PO standpoint. But I think having those conversations with the district is a good thing that you can do. And I think it's a best practice because the CBOC does the annual report. The district wants a good positive report from the CBOC so that that the community knows that on behalf of the CBOC that the district is doing what they said they were going to do. So I think having a very constructive and collaborative relation between the CBOC and district is beneficial for all parties.
This is the last question for this session with Steve and Tammy. Can bond dollars be used for litigation related to the builder issues?
So again, legal question, but we see, I think to Tammy's point, if the legal issues occurred from the project that's specifically identified in the ballot language listed projects, then we see a lot of council say, yes, that is appropriate because that is specifically because of the bond program.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. I'll let you
Yes, this is good.
go on
Thank
to
you
the
so
next
much.
session.
Yeah, this was a very informative session. I've seen that we might have a hand up with Mia Richardson. We'll come back to you later because I want to make sure that, you know, for those who are on Zoom, we can get back to them. But you're going to have to wait a little while until we get back after our other questions. But anyway, thank you both, Steve and Tammy, for your presentation. Very, very well done. And our
All right.
next,
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day, and feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Now, our next speaker is Tom Rubin, who will present the CABOC legislation proposal for 2023. Tom, are you here?
No, but I'll try to do it through mind force. Okay, very good. Next slide, please. One of the main things that CABOC does and will be doing is working for better state statutory, regulatory, and administrative improvements so that CBOCs can do their job. I think you want to put my face up there. We have a mandate under California Ed Code, section 1527882, to do our job, to be faithful to the intention of the voters and what they approved. Right now, as you will hear shortly when Anton starts talking about our survey that we did, there's a lot of CBOCs that are just not allowed to do their job by their governing boards and by the administrative functions. We've got to do better. We have been working very hard for quite a while to get our information, our package together, and we're continuing to work on it. So now I'm going to go through it, see what's in there. Everything is available. You see on a link here, you have available what all of our documents, and as we update them, we'll continue to update them there on the website. So next slide, please. Here's a summary of the main elements. This is not in the exact same format as the documents I just referenced. And the reason is I don't have much time, so I'm going to have to go through it fairly quickly. Those are the five main elements. Next slide, please. One of the major problems, by far the worst that we're dealing with, is that CABOC are not independent. Why? Because we have the CABOC members being appointed and selected by the people that they are supposed to be overseeing. That is a direct conflict of interest. We have got to figure out how to get this changed. This also will be what will be most difficult to get changed, but that is at the top of the list. CBOCs have to have the total responsibility for their own actions. We have CBOCs right now that aren't even allowed to set up their own bylaws, that don't set their own agendas, don't set their own meeting dates, etc. This is how bad it is. CBOCs have to have the power to do their job. One very important thing that we're going to be pushing for is the ability for each CBOC to have its own legal counsel, independent legal counsel, reporting only to the CBOC, paid by the district, not out of bond funds, because that's illegal right now, but every CBOC to have, if it wants it, its own independent legal counsel that will advise it and it alone. Next slide, please. CBOCs, in order to do their job, must have a budget. They must be funded to do what they do. They also have to have full and timely access, with the exception of things that are legally privileged, such as legal actions that are underway and a few other things, such as certain personnel actions. But legal ability to go in and get all documents, to talk to all personnel, to get out to all the job sites, and to talk to contractors. And also the CBOCs will have sole control over their own websites. Right now, we have a statute that says that all CBOCs should have websites and that the district should provide them. Control is a little bit different from having a website. Next slide, please. Okay, we had a question on this, and I'll spend a little bit more time on that. Right now, there is a specific requirement in the California Constitution, coming from Prop 39, that the ballot measures presented to the electorate must have a list of the specific school facilities projects to be funded by the ballot measure. Makes sense. I will tell you that this is very difficult to do. because the needs change over time. But it's a requirement in the Constitution. There was a legal action, Foothill De Anza Community College versus Emmerich a few years back. I will tell you, never get into an argument with an attorney about the law. You will never win. But my personal interpretation is that we have some bond counsel in some districts that are pushing what is actually in that opinion way too far, particularly since obviously the state constitution overrides not only case law, but statutory law. So what we need to do, we believe, is to get specific statutory language that defines what should be in the project list. What we are recommending is that we start with a facilities master plan that has everything that the district needs to do and plans to do going out decades. This is the best way to do long-term facilities planning. And that the project list specifically reference that facilities master plan. And in addition, it have a priority list saying these are the things, preferably in order, that we think need to be done first. This new school, this upgrade of the intranet and the intranet at each of our schools, et cetera, new air conditioners at this school, et cetera. There should be a priority list. The district governing board should have the ability to change the priorities. But if it's not on the facilities master plan, then where the hell is it coming from? So we believe that that first thing in there, a list of the specific school facilities projects to be funded, is extremely important. Right now, what has gone on for the first decade or decade and a half of Prop 39 is school districts would commonly have a list of new schools. And it would vary, but often a generalized description such as a middle school of approximately 600 seats to be located within half a mile of the intersection of First and East Street or something of that nature. And then they would often do what we call the matrix. And across the top of the matrix, like a spreadsheet, you have the list of every school in the district. And then down the left side, you have absolutely everything you could possibly do to a district. And as long as you can find a cell, the intersection of the name of the school and the project, you say, okay, yeah, this was on the list we presented to the voters. Well, we would like it a little bit more specific than that. This will be difficult. We'll see. Okay, next slide, please. Audit. Audit is one of the most important things to control and properly manage any type of facilities program. Let me start by saying, I hope everybody listens to what Moss Adams said. I hope they get their PowerPoints. I hope they listen to the recording. They did an outstanding job. They have been there and done that. Well, the CBOCs need to get involved. This will start with, of course, the CBOC members learning what is involved in an audit, but what can be done better? We believe that the CBOCs need to have a role from start to finish. First, to be there when the audit objectives and scope are set forth. And this is particularly important in performance audit. They should be involved in the selection of the auditors. They should be involved in the audit kickoff meetings, and the CBOC or a subcommittee of the CBOC should get the drafts, and then the full CBOC see the final reports. While we're here, for God's sakes, do not allow the district, if you have any control at all, to low bid the procurement of the auditors. This is not something where you want the lowest bidder. You need specialists. You need people with experience who have been there and done that, preferably in Prop 39 and it's K-12 and community college instruction. Don't buy audits like a commodity. You won't like what you get. And the first audit that should be done is before you do anything else in a program, go out and get some really qualified performance auditors, including some specialists in construction, to make sure that you have the people, and people come first, qualified, experienced experts in construction planning, et cetera, et cetera. You have the systems, you have the procedures, all in place before you turn over that first shovel of dirt. Next slide, please. We believe very strongly here at CABOC that training of CBOC members is absolutely essential. That's why we put on these conferences. We have a huge amount of materials on our website, and we are now kicking off our own videos. And we just had our first recording session for the first, 5 of them, I believe. And we hope to be rolling those out very shortly. You have the video of our last conference, and you'll have the video of this conference. So what we would like to see is some dedicated funding. And we are working with people at the state level to help set up some programs on training that we can carry forward and make available at no cost to CBOC members, and to make CBOC members make sure they know they exist and how to get in it. Okay, next slide, please. Where are we right now? Well, we've got an election coming up. So this is not the best time to be going to Sacramento and trying to find legislators to sponsor our programs in the next year. But we are doing that. There's 120 elected legislators in the state of California. All 80 of the members of the assembly are up for re-election, and 20 of the 40 senators are up for re-election. So there's only 20 senators that are not currently looking at an election of their own. So we are working with those 20, and we're working with the other 100 in some cases, at least to make the first calls, at least to get them to start talking to us, at least to make sure they know we're there. But we have a list, and we're going through the list, and we're working with the members of the assembly and the senators to see who will sponsor our program. In the meantime, we have a template for a resolution for individual CBOCs to pass a resolution in support of our program. This is very important. When the process gets started, we want to go in with a long list and say, here's all the people who have already said that they think our program is important. First, get the CBOC, your CBOC, to adopt it. And we'll be happy to work with you. Again, we have a template, it's in Word, it's easy to change, but you have to do a few things to adapt it for your own purposes. Then, after you've done that, reach out. See if you can get your governing board to adopt it as well. See if you can get a local taxpayers association, chambers of commerce, PTAs, etc., to also do that. We're doing it from here, but one-to-one locally is a far better way. We'll keep you informed on how we're doing. You'll get notices from us. Do what you can to help. Once we have legislation, and in Sacramento, the season really starts within a week or two after the election, when people start putting together their new pieces of legislation. And by December, it's going full bore. So you want to have your initial bill set up and get the wording right, which is done by a special office of the legislature before even the legislature formally starts the beginning of the year. Well, we're working on that. Once we have a bill number, we will get back to you, and we would like each CBOC and other organization, as well as you as individuals, to go to the California Legislature Position Letter Portal. If you want to go on record for committee report purposes that you favor or oppose something, we want you to get in there and formally tell people that's what it is. It's a bit of a headache to get in there. Let us know. We'll be happy to help you. It's more important to have associations than individuals because the associations are listed individually, where the individuals, they just show the numbers. But do that, and then you have to do it again for each committee hearing. And there generally will be at least 4 committee hearings. So it's a lot of work, but it's important. Then you've got to get to your own assembly persons and your senators. So have fun with that. We'll keep you updated, but it's up to you. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I said, we're working on finding the legislatures, and we have some nibbles, and we think we're going to be successful with that. This is a long-term process. Again, the basic problem is that elected officials don't like oversight, particularly from someone they didn't appoint to oversee them. This will be difficult. It will probably take at least a couple of years to get everything we want. And frankly, it is doubtful if we'll ever get everything we want. And we'll just have to see how it plays forth. It may be that we won't be able to get our top priorities the first year. We'll try. But if we can't, can we get some other things that will be useful and at least show that we can get a bill passed? So this is something that we have our leadership at CABOC in place working on. We want your feedback and participation. So if there are things that are important to your organization that you would like to see in legislation, let us know. We'd like you to participate in the committee hearings as they come up. Excuse me. Thank you. And you can do this right now by video, as well as by sending in your letters. But we hope before too much longer, they will actually be in person. And then finally, get active in CABOC and actively assist in getting this done. Next slide. Questions?
I believe Anton's going to handle this. Go ahead. Anton, you need to unmute. Okay, there you are.
Thank you, Tom. That was fantastic. Keith, how do I get onto the chat? Got it. Thank you. Tom, first question. Any tips how CBOC can communicate best to the public?
Yes, several things. First of all, every CBOC should have a website. As we said, the CBOC should definitely have full control over its own website. You should use that very actively. You should have your full schedule of meetings throughout the entire year with the site, obviously the time. You should post your agendas as far in advance as possible. It's got to be 72 hours because of the Brown Act. But post your agendas, and then everything you do, every resolution you adopt, the minutes of your meetings, etc., have on your website. You can also post various papers that you do that are important to you, that you think people should know about. One of the other things that we are suggesting is that you have a process either on the CBOC website or the district's own website so that potential CBOC members can see what they need to do to apply. And what we really recommend is that people be encouraged to apply in advance and fill out the papers so that when there is an opening, and unfortunately people leave the CBOC for a lot of different reasons, and then seats come open after the 2-year term, and there's a limit on how many terms you can serve. So it's nice to have these people identified and they've been pre-qualified so the appointments can go quicker. So those are the main things. Use your website, have a contact point where people can email, they can call in, leave a message if they like. If people want to use snail mail, have contact points. We do not recommend that you put the addresses, phone numbers, and emails of all CBOC members. If each CBOC and each CBOC member wants to do that, fine. But we do not recommend that as a CABOC position. But have someplace that those messages, those questions, those concerns can come in.
Thank you, Tom. Next question. Can a district insist that a CBOC file Open Records Act request for financial bond expenditures?
Well, Horsepucky, we believe that the existing statutory language is very clear that the CBOC has the power to do what it needs to do to find out about the program. And that includes getting into records, getting the people to talk to, and making tours of sites. But this is the type of thing we constantly run into. And that's one of the reasons we said we want additional legislation that makes it even clearer. There is the possibility of a legal challenge. And we've talked about this. We haven't made any decisions yet. At some point, when we find the right lawsuit to bring, we may take it to court. There's an old saying in litigation, bad cases make bad law. So we want, if we're going to go to court, we want to have a lawsuit where we have a really stupid defendant who has done some really egregious things, so we make sure we'll win. And then we'll have it. But this is one of the reasons why we recommend that each CBOC, each CBOC have its own independent legal counsel. When you get into that battle with the district and they have an attorney, you need your attorney. Again, we're going to need legislation to get that guarantee.
Thank you, Tom. All the statutes say that the board appoints the initial CBOC members. Can't the bylaws say that the CBOC appoints subsequent members?
That's not how I read the legislation. I believe it says that it appoints all of the members, not just the initial. What was done at the Los Angeles Unified School District was that there was a memorandum of understanding between the Bond Oversight Committee, as it's known there, and the district, where the district agreed that 13 of the 15 members would be nominated by stakeholder groups. And these stakeholder groups included AARP for the senior citizens, the LA Chamber of Commerce for the business group. And we also had PTAs appointed we had 2 PTA districts in LA, and several other groups, including American Institute of Architects, construction trades, the construction contractors, etc. And these were nominated, and then the district board was required to appoint them. So the statutory language was clear, but we got the nomination through an enforceable contract, that MOU, that said that most of the BOC members were coming from outside. How do you get an MOU? Well, the best time is never let a good crisis go to waste. What are the 2 crises? One, there is a Prop 39 construction bond ballot measure that's going to the public, to the electorate. Sit down with the superintendent, sit down with the board president, and say, you know, we would really like, the CBOC would really like to endorse this, but to endorse it, we have to see that we're able to do our job. So we would like an MOU that spells out, again, in a legally enforceable contract, our powers. And so that's one time where there's a crisis. The other is when you have an absolute total disaster, and unfortunately we've had some, where the construction programs have gone really off the track. And the district is desperate to try to somehow gain back its acceptance by the voters that they can handle their money. Next.
Next question, Tom, is can a CBOC member write an opposition to a bond measure currently on the ballot?
Hey, I don't see why not. When you become a member of a CBOC, you do not lose any of your rights as a citizen other than conflicts of interest. But conflict of interest in this situation, that's not a conflict. If you're getting paid money through the district, through a construction contract or something, that's a conflict of interest. But if you have an opinion as an individual, that's not a problem. Be very careful. If you are a CBOC member and you're expressing opinion like that, make sure that you clarify that you are expressing that opinion as an individual. You are a member of the CBOC, but you are not expressing the will of the CBOC. That can only be done if the CBOC actually votes and adopts a position.
What do you do when a school district does not appoint a CBOC?
Well, this is a major problem. There is some very strong language in the statutes where a district that does not do the right thing in regard to the CBOC is very vulnerable to a legal action that requires them to do that. Up to and including, some people might say that the entire bond program is suspended until they meet the qualifications, meet the requirements that are stipulated in the statute. When I said that CABOC is looking for the right lawsuit to bring, if we're going to bring a lawsuit, well, something as blatant as not having a CBOC at all, that might qualify. Other things that could happen if they've never had a taxpayer representative, which is a requirement. If they've never had a senior citizen representative, which is required. If they fail on that, that might be a good action. But if it's just a month or 2 months when someone resigned before someone else can get appointed, that's probably not worth acting. But if they've never done it, if they've never had a CBOC, that might be ripe for a legal action. And frankly, CABOC would love to have that case go to court where we get a favorable decision.
That is the last question I have on the chat. Does anybody else want to make a chat question before we move on?
Or you can have me randomly pontificate for a while.
Yeah, Anton, we had Mia Richardson with her hand up. So she may have a question for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Keith, how we do that.
Why doesn't she just put a question in chat?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll get to it. Yeah, we might have problems unmuting you, so.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I asked a question about the former CBOC member who wrote an opposition to argument to a current bond, and the committee was disbanded. In other words, we are in litigation, so the CBOC is no longer meeting. Does that make it and the district acknowledged that they are not going to be, as far as they're concerned, because of the litigation, they're no longer holding meetings. And that was a question that I had as well. Can they still advocate against a current bond, which is still where, the district wants to push for teacher housing? And can teacher housing be included in a facilities request?
Okay, well, teacher housing, this is a legal question. My personal opinion is no, but I'm not a lawyer. It says school construction. Teacher housing is not school construction. I am aware of school districts that have gotten involved in employee housing, and I can certainly see the reason, particularly for teachers. So many school districts, particularly in the larger metro areas in California, it's almost impossible for a new teacher coming in to find a place to live within the district, and often within 30 miles of the district. It can be that bad. But I got a real hard time with that. And again, you've got to go to council and see what council says. But one of the big problems that could happen is that it's passed, then there is an action of some sort or a ruling of some sort that says that, no, you can't use Prop 39 bond funds for teacher housing. And somebody brings an action against the entire bond and says the whole thing's invalid. Now, again, this is not legal advice. These are questions that one should ask attorneys who are qualified in this matter. So I think that's a very, very dangerous area. I think your school district is playing with fire, and not having a CBOC. Again, my opinion, absolutely wrong. Lawsuit has nothing to do with it. We have state statute that says you must have a CBOC, period. End of story. That doesn't say except when you're being sued. Ridiculous.
Oh, okay. If I may, a follow-up quick question. When gosh, it's just so much happening in our school district. Now I
Go ahead. Take a deep breath. Take your time.
Well, you said some very disturbing things that I understand. We're just not in the right place in my school district, and they're now coming back asking for more money. And I have a problem with that as well. But I heard, okay, here it was. Someone told me that Prop 46 and the passage of the school teacher housing would require a higher pass rate of 67% versus the 55% of just a regular bond facilities request. Could this be a valid point to bring to the district?
Well, again, I would, this is a legal question. I will tell you, ask an attorney who specializes in this particular area. I think the district, if they try to intermix it, they will be opening themselves up for some potential lawsuits. Even if they don't lose the lawsuit, it could hold things up for quite a while before anything could get done. So I think they are treading on very, very dangerous ground. If I were you, I would see if I could get a pro bono attorney. As no one, of course, who is not getting the money from the taxpayers can afford attorneys. See if you can find a pro bono attorney who can help you out on that. But from what you've described, what school district are we talking about?
South San Francisco Unified School District.
Okay. Yeah,
years ago, put up a bond, and all the project money was there was audits, and there was some kind of missing money, millions in fact. And so we're still in litigation over that, and they're back to asking for more money this time, not less but more. They want $436 million from the taxpayers. So there's been a big pushback against this bond, and employees of the administration are paying, donating money to pass it. And I'm a board member at the moment, and I was the only one that opposed the bond, and 4 of them agreed to advance it to the ballot. So that's, if you need to know a little background, that's the mess I'm in. Thank you.
Well, I certainly understand that. And things have gotten very, very bad. Here is how bad they have gotten. This is a recent audit, a special piece of work done by the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistant Team, extraordinary audit of Bassett Unified School District. If you really want to see how bad it can get, you might check that one out. I've seen worse, but this is pretty bad. So be aware that the chickens eventually do come home to roost.
I do have another question for you, Tom. We're having difficulty filling the taxpayer representative. Can you expand on who or what might constitute this position?
Yes, they're looking for somebody who is active in a taxpayer organization. First of all, you are not limited in looking at a local taxpayer organization. So you don't need a taxpayer organization that's only for your school district, your community college district, or even for your city or your county. You can go to a statewide organization. You can even go to an organization in another city or county. That's perfectly legal. There is not a residency requirement for CBOC members. Some people think there should be, but right now there isn't. And there are a number of county taxpayer organizations. I'm vice president of the Alameda County Taxpayers Organization. Why don't you do a direct, just put in a chat with who you are, where you are, and I'll get back to you and see if I can come up with someone. I will tell you what some people have done in the past. They have found a person who they believe has the type of taxpayer orientation who might not be a member of such an organization. They have then suggested that that person contact the Howard Jarrett organization and have them nominate, put that person forward. So there are a variety of ways to do that. But send in your contact information. I'll contact you and see what we might be able to come up with.
Another question, Tom, just to be clear, there should be ongoing recruitment for CBOC members.
I definitely feel that way because CBOC members change at all times for all reasons. We had one pass away very unexpectedly. And it can take, even best case, 2 months before you go through the process and the person is appointed by the board. And I myself, as consultant to the Los Angeles Unified Bond Oversight Committee, we sometimes would take up to 6 months trying to find people. And so we really, really encourage both the districts and the CBOCs to actively try to recruit people in advance and do a pre-qualification. By pre-qualification, what do I mean? Well, one, if you're applying for a parent or guardianship, you are a parent, of a student in this district, right? Okay. If you're a senior citizen, you are a member of a senior citizens organization, such as AARP. Okay, fine. And do you have a conflict of interest? Yes or no? If you can get that out of the way and then get resumes, then you can speed up the process. And if you're really fortunate, if you have 2 or 3 candidates for open seats, you can move this along and get it down to maybe 1 to 2 months to fill the slot. But also, when you know that someone's term is coming up, and remember, 2-year terms, statutory limit of 3 2-year terms, so you can go in to the State Board of Education and get an extension. To the best of my knowledge, they've never turned that request down. But when you know someone's term is up, for God's sake, start early to get the appointment made before the term expires.
Tom, I've got one last question for you before we move on to the next session. It says our bylaws require CBOC members to be residents of the district.
Well, when you say bond laws,
Bylaws.
if that
Bylaws.
means the ballot measure that was presented to the voters under Prop 39 and passed, if it says it in there, I would say that's probably valid.
No, they're referring to the bylaws, Tom.
The bylaws, if the CBOC adopts its own bylaws and it's in there, then it's valid. Of course, if the CBOC adopts the bylaws, it can also change its bylaws. If the governing board adopts it, as I've said, we think that's not what governing board should be involved in. Governing board should not be involved at all with the bylaws of CBOCs.
Thank you, sir. You did an outstanding job. I'll turn it back to Carolyn.
Thank
And
you.
we're right on time.
Good. We're real, I really must be a taskmaster to make sure you're on time. Anyway, our next speaker is Anton Younghair, and he is the CABOC co-founder and executive. And he'll talk about a survey that he completed with the CABOC compliance survey for 2021. So this is going to be interesting stuff. Go ahead, Anton.
Thank you, Carolyn. Carolyn's my boss. She's the president of the Cal Bar Association of Bond Oversight Committees. Broken promises, failure of Prop 39 school CBOCs to provide independent and transparent oversight. You see the student, very sad. This to me is a very sad situation, to having to discuss broken promises. The promises made in each district's bond oversight election, where they promise the voters that there will be independent oversight. That is the promise that this survey will demonstrate has been broken. The promise that is made in every single bond election. There's 87 bond elections on the ballot for the November election. Every single one of those elections, the districts make a promise to the voters that there'll be independent oversight. Next slide. What I'm going to do during this presentation is to discuss why we did the survey, how we did the survey, and next steps and questions. Next slide. Why did we do the survey? There's ample evidence that citizen bond oversight committees are not independent or transparent. You need only to refer to the Little Hoover Commission report, 2009, that reported on this. They followed up that report in 2017. I testified at that hearing, as well as other CABOC members testified. There's many audits by FISMAC, by the state controller and the state auditors. There's forensic accounting investigations, many performance audits, numerous grand jury reports, court cases, and anecdotal reports. So I think there's ample evidence that there's issues with bond oversight committees. The purpose of a compliance survey is to prevent deficiencies and violations and identify and correct them when they are found. However, there's been no independent compliance survey of the 499 California K-14 citizen bond oversight committees since the passage of Prop 39 almost 22 years ago. Next slide. How did we do the report? Initially, our board of directors in June 11th authorized the report. We picked a sample of 205 districts of the 490 using a random number generator. This sample size will be results with a confidence level of 95% with a confidence interval of 5%. On July 5th, we sent a California Records Act request to the chief business official of the 205 sample districts, and we requested 9 documents. As you know, when you do a California Records Act request, you cannot ask for specific information. You can only ask for documents. So the scope of the audit was to ask for specific documents, and then we would analyze those documents to answer specific questions. For example, on the annual report issued during 2021, we would ask the question, was there a compliance opinion? We asked for the audit report for June 30 to 21, the performance audit. We asked for the agenda packets and minutes so we can see if they're meeting, if they're approving annual reports, if they're reviewing audit reports, etc. We asked for the board policies and bylaws that relate to CBOCs. We asked for copies of the independent legal agreement if it existed, and we asked for their website URL so that we could confirm that they did have a functioning website. And then, in the interest of making sure we had the right data, on October 3rd, we sent an email to the superintendent and each CBOC who had indicated to us in our bond request, and we know that bond request was over a 3-month period. So it took us 3 months to get the documents, and some of the documents were not available or the district did not respond. So any district who told us the document was not available or did not respond to our California Records Act request, we sent them an email telling them that. And we gave them to the end of the week, October 7th, to respond if they did not agree. Every district that responded, we responded back and resolved the issue. For example, a typical issue was the district said, oh, we gave you the audit report. And the report they gave us was the comprehensive audit report that every district is required to produce on all of their funds. That is not the annual financial report or the annual performance report required by Prop 39. And by the way, Prop 39 was an amendment to the California Constitution. So that requirement is actually in the Constitution. So we would write back to the auditor. Sometimes the district attorney got involved and we sent them a copy of the Prop 39 to try to convince them that the comprehensive audit is not the required bond audits. So that was done. We resolved those matters and prepared the final results. Next slide. The first item, the first report we reviewed was the annual report. Was an annual report issued during 2021? Was there a CBOC compliance opinion? And was there an annual report on the website? Now, we asked a number of other questions, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'm only picking out the significant questions. There was a total of 36 questions. We wrote the questions. We analyzed the documents that they gave to us and determined if the answer was on that document. For example, if they issued a report in 2021, we also asked them, or we asked our reviewers, what was the date that the report was issued? So we had a number of districts said, yeah, we issued a report in 2021. We went and looked at the report and it said, oh, it was issued in March 2022. So we said, okay, the answer to that question is no. You did not issue an annual report. The requirement is that you issue an annual report. You can't issue an annual report for 2021 and 2022. We found also districts who were behind in issuing annual reports. They hadn't issued an annual report for a couple of years. So they issued a couple annual reports in that year. About 1/4 of the districts issued an annual report in 2021, and half of these reports had no compliance opinion. Now, the compliance opinion is the opinion of the CBOC that the district is in compliance with Prop 39. Now, some of the district would argue, oh, our auditor said we're in compliance. Why does the CBOC need to issue an opinion? Well, the law says the CBOC is required to provide an independent opinion. It's not the auditor's opinion. It's not the district's opinion. It's the CBO's opinion. Now, I had some districts that said, oh, the staff, the superintendent gave a report to the board and the superintendent said, we're in compliance. Well, the superintendent's opinion is not the CBOC's opinion. Then I had another district who the chief business officer gave the opinion and said that this is the opinion of the CBOC, and he gave the opinion. But when you look at the district CBOC website, the CBOC never had an action at a board, at a committee meeting where they approved an annual report to the public. So even though the staff represented it was the CBOC's report, it was never approved by the CBOC. It was written by the by the staff, presented by the staff as a CBOC report. Next slide. We looked at the financial audit for June 2021. 86% of the districts who responded said that was done. Only half of those audit reports are on the CBOC website. So how can the public know what those audits say? There's a requirement that every document go on the CBOC website. In addition, there's a requirement that the CBOC accept both the performance audit and the finance audit each year, the annual audits. So half of these audits are not on the website. Next slide. Performance audit, only 49% completed it, and half of them again are not on the website. Next slide. Agenda packets. 82% of the districts, CBOCs that we reviewed, had one or more meeting. That means 12% of the CBOCs, we could find no evidence. We could find no agendas. We could find no minutes on their website that they even had one single meeting during the year. The only requirement in the Ed Code of a CBOC is to have one meeting a year. And we could not verify 12% having one single meeting during 2021. Next slide. On the minutes, as you know, in the education code, there's a requirement that there be 7 members. 1/3 of the agendas and minutes we reviewed did not have 7 members, a minimum of 7 members. 1/3 of the CBOCs, we could not confirm that they had at least 7 members. 31%, almost 1/3, we could not confirm that they have a taxpayer rep. And one half of the CBOCs, we could find no evidence in their minutes that they ever approved an annual report to the public. 1/2, no annual report approved. Next slide. District board policies. Every board policy that we reviewed is titled bylaws. In those bylaws approved by the District Board of Education, 43%, almost one half had the phrase in the first, this was in the first paragraph of that bylaw, and I quote, "The committee does not have legal capacity independent from the district," close quote. Let me read that again. This is in almost one half of the bylaws that we reviewed. And this is in the board approved bylaws. The committee, they were talking about the CBOC committee, does not have legal capacity independent from the district. To me, that means it's not an independent CBOC. In reviewing those policies, one half of those policies, bylaws approved by the district said that the committee could even not establish their own meeting schedule, which is so fundamental. A typical phrase was the CBOC can meet no more often than quarterly. You cannot have any more than 4 meetings a year. They had restrictions. The CBOC cannot establish subcommittees. And here's the one that really gets me. Can a CBOC establish its own bylaws? In 3/4 of these board approved bylaws, the CBOC had no ability to establish its own bylaws, to govern how it's going to function, to say what officers they're going to have, how they're going to provide independent oversight, how they're going to review audits, how they're going to talk to contractors. 3/4 of those bylaws approved by school districts says the CBOC has no authority to have its own bylaws. They can't even determine when they're going to meet, what's going to be on the agenda, and how they're going to operate to provide independent oversight. Next slide. We asked for independent legal agreements. No district was able to provide us with any independent legal agreement that a CBOC had between the committee and an independent lawyer paid for by the district. It was noted that West Contra Costa Unified School District for 6 years did have such an agreement, but that was recently canceled. And Tom earlier referred to the Los Angeles Unified School District Memorandum of Understanding. I would note that that was adopted prior to the approval of Prop 39 in 2000. And that district not only has an independent legal counsel paid by the district, but they have an independent staff to the CBOC, which is paid by the district. But based on this survey, there's no district in California, no CBOC in California, at least in the sample group, who'd had such a district as of this time. Next slide. Does the CBOC have a website? Again, such a basic requirement, and we found 8% of the CBOCs. We couldn't even find a website, and that's after we spent hours searching through the search engine on the district's website, searching through Google. We could not find a CBOC website. Next slide. What are the next steps? Well, clearly we'll prepare a comprehensive written report. It'll have the answers to all the 36 questions that we reviewed. We'll have technical appendices as to how we did this. A question might be, should the survey results be made public to the individual districts? In other words, should ABC district know that they did not have a CBOC or didn't have any meetings? Who should be informed of the results of this survey? Are there additional research studies that we could do based on the documents? We have 200 documents, bylaws, audit reports, annual reports. We have a wealth of information. We could do surveys on performance audits, how many recommendations were made by various auditors. We could do additional surveys on the follow-up by the districts and the CBOC on audit recommendations. So there's a lot of additional research we could do on the wealth of information we've collected. Next slide. What do we do now? Can you open the chat for me? When is a school district in California that has questionable financial reports, what is the statute of limitation to request and conduct a forensic audit? I'm not aware of any statute of limitation. Tom, do you have a thought on that?
No, I think you're correct. There's a limit on what action can be taken. Obviously, if you go back and find something that was wrong 10 years ago, and that is an outgrowth of an audit, it would be hard to bring a criminal action in most cases because the statute of limitations for that. But for conducting an audit, I think it often makes sense to go back quite a ways. And the reason for that is there's a lot of things that go on. You have to go back quite a ways to find out what's going on. There's a lot of construction contracts for individual schools that you do need to go back 10 years to get the entire picture.
Next question is, what is the difference between a K-12 and a K-14 audit under Prop 39? There's no difference. The California Audit Guide Appendix A applies equally to K-12 and community colleges. There's no differences. Community college has exactly the same both constitutional requirements and statutory requirements. The only difference is their CBOC is a little, the legally required positions are a little different. For example, they're required to have a student who goes to the community college part of the CBOC. But other than that, everything else is the same. Can this presentation become a standalone piece and we can send it to our legislators? Absolutely. That's a great question, and the answer is yes. Can this be sent to the media? Absolutely. I would love to have some press conferences and send this out, and we will absolutely do that. Any further questions? Did CBOC website appear hard to find on purpose? Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer, but it seems to me that that's a very, technically it's very easy to do. And I'm not sure why that was not done, but certainly you cannot have a transparent CBOC if the website is not even available to the public. And, a good test of this is just go to Google. Go to Google and put the district's name and CBOC. That's a good way to see if they have a website. I found one district who listed the website under the facilities construction department. Probably that's going to be a hard place to find it if somebody Googles CBOC. Can we find out if our college was part of the survey, not the results? Yes, you certainly can. And is the CBOC considered public so survey results are not available to CBOC members? Well, the survey results, not sure I understand the question, but the survey results are clearly public, and anybody that wants the survey results for any specific district, that's certainly available because we're only reporting what is on the district's website. So we got the documents from the districts. Some cases they didn't give us the document. We couldn't include it in the survey. School districts are compliance minded. Best practice will not be adopted by many unless the laws make it necessary. Well, I think you're correct. I think as a footnote, when the state audit guide, which governs audits for school districts, comes out annually. And annually, each year, they ask the auditor to review specific items. For example, 2 years ago, they asked the auditor, who audits every school district in California, to check on the vaccination records. And that came up with particular doubt. The audit guide for performance and financial audits has not been changed since 2016. I think it would be nice if the audit guide said, did the CBOC or did the district have a CBOC? And the auditor each year opine on that. Did the district have a taxpayer rep? Did the district have 7 CBOC members on the CBOC? So I think the annual audit guide, which every auditor who does a compliance audit for the bond program could be asked these questions. And the questions could change every year, just like they do in the K-12 world. So I think that would be a good practice. And it's one of the things that our organization is going to advocate for, that the audit each year answers some of those basic compliance questions. Now, we're not going to ask, did you do a good annual report? That's a subjective question. But did you do an annual report with a compliance opinion, which is required? And by the way, issuing an annual report is the only legal requirement that I'm aware of that a CBOC has to do every year. They're not, other than meet once a year and issue a compliance report, that is the absolute minimum that a CBOC has to do. And I think if the auditor would check that out every year, it would be a great value. The other thing I think would be of value to have all the audit reports in one place. You know, in the K-12 world, all the audit reports have to be reported to the state controller. So you can go to the state controller's website and review any district's audit report. I would, right now, I have about 200 audit reports. I have about probably a larger group of bond audit reports than anybody in California. I think districts should be required to update their audit reports to state controller. It only takes 2 minutes. You click and it's there. Are CBOC's rules applied to general obligation bonds? Well, citizen bond oversight committees oversee Prop 39 general obligation bonds. So that's the job of a CBOC, is to report on and issue opinion on general obligation bonds. Next question. This is closely tied to legislative addenda. Wouldn't it make sense to have the legislative priorities, the ability of CBOCs to establish their own bylaws? Tom, why don't you speak to that?
Yes, most definitely. That is one of the greatest examples of independence. If an organization does not have the power to set its own bylaws, to set its own schedule of meetings, to establish its own agenda, how can you say that it's independent? So as you saw on my presentation, the PowerPoint, these are definitely things that we are most interested in getting firmed up in law. Frankly, I think the current statutory language, just by saying independent bond oversight committee, requires that. But you can always find somebody who says, oh no, it didn't specifically require it, therefore it's not required and it's prohibited even. So yes, agree quite strongly on that.
I've had attorneys send me opinions that CBOC has no authority to adopt its own bylaws. And as you noted in the survey, 75% of the bylaws approved by the district. I mean, just the thought of a district even approving a bylaw for the CBOC, I think is abhorrent. But just to make sure, they put a clause in that says the CBOC cannot change it. 75% of the bylaws approved by districts have that requirement. Are your survey results on the CBOC website? Yes, they will be. Is a school district board, if the school district board has an attorney present, what would you do or say? You know what? Let me give you a story. A member of a CBOC called me last week, and they told me that their school district bond council was chairing their CBOC meeting. Understand that. Their school district bond council was chairing their CBOC meeting. During a subsequent meeting, one of the members said, isn't this a conflict of interest, having the district bond council chairing our meeting? So you know what they did? They changed the website. I know this because I looked at the website. They changed the website. The chair of the CBOC on the website is blank. There's no CBOC member, chair of the CBOC, and the district's bond council continues to chair that CBOC's meeting. I would argue that it's a conflict of interest. I would argue for a school district, either bond council or a school district attorney, to provide any legal advice to a CBOC is a violation of the oath of a CBO, of a lawyer. I think it's a violation of the California Bar Association canons. A CBOC lawyer has to be independent of the district, has to have a attorney-client privilege with the CBOC. There's an inherent conflict between a district attorney advising a CBOC, in my view, and I think Tom eloquently spoke to that in the legislative program. I would love to have a case. I'd love to have a test case on this. I'm trying to get a district who will let me take the district to court and see if we can get some a case on this.
Anton, we have Amina with her hand up, and she's not using chat right now. So can we jump into her real quick?
Yeah, the problem with using the chat is we get into discussions,
Yeah,
and I'd rather keep with what we've done with everybody else, if that's okay.
okay.
And we will.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this as a wealth of knowledge. The question was prior related to the access up to bond advice from a lawyer. Can we use, or should we use, or are they like myself, I'm a board member, am I allowed to approach the county attorneys with a situation like this, or are they just beholden to the district schools?
That's a matter for your own board and legal counsel. So it's not a matter I can opine on.
I'll just say you might want to contact your county civil grand jury to see if they want to take a look at it.
Oh, I'm glad you said that really briefly, because it's like I said, we did have the grand jury look into it, and it came back without a decision at all. So, I mean, this is gonna unearth old issues, and I wasn't on the board then, but you know, that's the response I have for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anton.
Mr. Young here, who is in charge of holding school districts accountable for every time they are using bond monies? I would say the CBOC. That's their primary responsibility. And if you read the legislative intent, it says they should do a vigorous oversight of the bond expenditures. That's the promise. That's the promise that was made to the voters when they adopted the bond measure. And I would argue that is the job of the CBOC. How about a district bond lawyer advising CBOC without a fee as a favor to the school district because the district attorney is retained for the selling of bonds? It's a conflict of interest. The bond attorney is responsible to the bond holders and the district. The bond counsel cannot provide independent legal advice to the CBOC. The CBOC is an independent body. You know, some board members, I had a board member at one meeting asked, why do we need a CBOC? I said, madam, you don't have to have a CBOC. Just go for a Prop 46 bond issue with a 2/3 vote. You can have no CBOC. There's no requirement for a CBOC on a Prop 46 bond, general bond measure, which would require a 2/3 vote. That was happened prior to 2000. There was no CBOCs prior to Prop 39 in 2000. And if you don't want to have a CBOC, just don't have a Prop 39 bond. Any other questions for me?
No, I guess not, Anton. Maybe we can finish your little session early and get to the next session, which is comments from participants. Shall we do that?
Sounds good.
Okay. Are there any comments from the participants? Where do we find that?
Well, they put them on the chat and I will read them off and we can see who would like to answer them.
Okay.
And this can be comments on anything talked today, anything that wasn't discussed today. And no, at the end of this session, you can go to our website, help desk. You can ask any question you want, bondoversight.org.
So Anton is monitoring the comments from the participants, if any.
It says, I'll put it in a minute. When will the survey results be on the website? Linda, are you here? I think, Linda, when are the results going to be on the website?
Did you give me permission to put them on the website?
You hereby have permission.
Okay, they're on the website in 2 minutes. Under, if you go to the homepage, on the top, there's a link to go to the 2022 conference page. Everything will be right there. There's links to all the presentations there and to the program.
Wow, you're incredible.
I know. Thank you for appreciating that.
Okay, here's a, whoa, I got a long question here. This question is at the City College of San Francisco. The bond council focused on correct conduct of meetings where the CBOC should be reviewing bond expenditures using quarter in which they concurred. I asked questions about certain unbudgeted expenses approved by the district governing board that were later allowed to be charged to a facility bond. I guess with respect to the first speaker's question, the factual statement that he made for me is that the committee doesn't review expenditures until after they're audited. Well, I think, and Tom can agree, can opine on this also, but the committee can review expenditures after they're made. They don't have to wait till after audit. By the way, the audit comes out a year later, and the requirement to give the audit to the CBOC is 9 months after the end of the fiscal year. So that could be 12 plus 9. That's gonna be a lot of months. But the CBOC is authorized, and one of their primary responsibilities is to look at the expenditures as they're made. Tom, you want to have a thought on that?
Yeah, if you wait until the expenditures have been made, you're way too late. You've got to get on top of this at the very beginning. So start with, does the district have a plan? Does it have a facilities master plan? Does it have a plan for the specific bond issue as to what its priorities are? Does it have the personnel, the procedures, the systems in place to actually manage it? And then are those procedures, systems, people working? So to wait until after the fact is way too late. You have to get involved on the ground floor to see that they've got good systems in place, and then monitor things very closely as they go. You don't wait until after the audit report comes out. That's useless. Thank you. I feel much better now.
Next question. I served on the CBOC for 3 years and have been on the board for 6 years. And I've learned so much from this session. Had I known what I know now, our district would have saved thousands of dollars. Well, I think you're correct. I think a CBOC overlooking the expenditures. Next question. Do you roughly know how long does a performance audit take? Should have asked that earlier. Tom, you want to opine on that?
Well, it will vary, of course, by exactly what you're doing and how deep you're going. For certain small ones, it would probably take longer to get the process started and the performance auditor engaged than to do the performance audit. But I have been involved in some performance audits that took the better part of a year to do. But that was a mighty big performance audit. I would say for the most part, 3 to 6 months perhaps, but there's a lot of exceptions. If you get out there and you can't find the records, that can slow things down quite a bit. I'll tell you one thing that really slows things down. When you go out there, you find some things you don't like, and you tell the person, we'll be back on Monday, and you come back on Monday and you find out that the person has committed suicide over the weekend, that generally means the performance audit is going to take a lot longer to be completed.
Oh, no.
And that does happen. That does happen.
Yeah.
You know, I want to tell you a little bit about the San Francisco story. If you want to know what folks can do, San Francisco Unified School District had a CBOC in place for 3 years. And a group of citizens got involved, ad hoc group, and said, we need to have a CBOC that's over. San Francisco Unified has $2 billion construction program. So they organized a recall of 3 school board members in San Francisco. That was successful. And as a result of that effort, the district reconstituted the CBOC, and the mayor appointed the chair of the CBOC to the school district board of trustees to replace one of the recalled trustees. So that shows what a committed group of citizens was able to do when the district wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing. And that speaks to the question, I cannot get the CBOCs to even address this advice. Well, the problem was a lot of the CBOCs, or in some district, the CBOC members. I had one district where every CBOC member was a former member of the school board. Now, do you think that's an independent CBOC? I've had another district where the members of the CBOC were the personal friends of the facility manager in that district. Do you think that provided for an independent CBOC? So if you have a CBOC that isn't listening to your advice, you probably have to go outside the CBOC. And when I want to make sure that everybody understands, when Tom spoke earlier about the legislative program, there's a specific section in the Ed Code on Prop 39 bonds, which says any citizen in the district can initiate a lawsuit against the district. That lawsuit will get precedent in the court, and that lawsuit, if successful, could result in a order to stop construction while the issue is ongoing. So a CBOC member as an individual could initiate such a lawsuit. We would be delighted to support that person with legal advice. And I think that's the only remedy that I could see. If you got a CBOC who was supposed to be providing independent advice, does not want to do so. Tom, do you have any other further thought on that?
In agreement with you on that. Yeah, it's just amazing what some people think they can get away with in ignoring the law.
Anton, do you have a lot more questions or shall we?
Yeah,
Oh,
let me
you
keep
have a-
going.
You got a few more? Okay.
Oh, I probably can fill up our time to 1:30. Is that okay?
Yeah, I was just thinking if we need to, we could, we might be going earlier to the awards, but it's up to the participants to ask the questions and us to respond.
Okay, well, we'll see if we get some good questions.
Okay,
I have been on the oversight committee for over 15 years, and multi-entities as a taxpayer representatives to me have been people who have not supported the original bond. Is very important. They provide a critical perspective. The ultimate way to hold a board accountable is at election time. I think that's correct. If you have school board members who are not fulfilling their fiduciary responsibility, I think that's what school board members have 4-year terms. CBOC can give an opinion immediately if a bond expenditure is not consistent with the bond measure, if the expenditure is not on a project list. So a CBOC can respond in real time. If you're going to deal with the term of a board member, you're going to have to wait for 4 years. The CBOC does not address current expenditures. They do review, they do not approve current expenditures. That's correct. CBOC, I want to make sure that's clear. A CBOC has no authority to approve bond expenditures. Their only authority is to oversee the expenditures and provide an opinion whether the expenditures are within the scope of the project list. How many CBOCs signed up for the conference? I don't know how many CBOCs. We have 175 folks signed up for the conference. There was a number of districts. Our group rate of 1 to 15 for $100 attracted a lot of customers. In some cases, I got board members, staff, and CBOC members all signed up under that group rate. So we got good attendance. The attendance is double what it was last year. This is our second conference. Do you think that imposing a state trustee for Bassett, considering how bad the forensic audit was, the county superintendent of schools in each county oversees the finances of each school district. The state getting involved relates to the general fund not having enough cash to pay the payroll, where they have to go for a state loan. So you'd have to go for a state loan in order to pay the payroll, in order to get a state trustee who would take over the district. I do not see that as a remedy in the bond world. That's only a remedy that the California, each county superintendent has under AB 1200 in regards to not having enough funds and possibly of going bankrupt. Do you pursue the CBOC to pay attention to current expenditures? Yes, I think every CBOC, first of all, I think if every CBOC that has a major bond program should be meeting monthly. I think at every monthly meeting, you should have a copy of the check register of the checks that were issued the prior month, who it was paid for, how it was paid, and what it was paid for. And I think what you should do is pick randomly 3 checks each month and ask the district to give you copies of the backup documents, and you actually review them. You review it at the CBOC meeting, or ideally, you set up an audit subcommittee that can review it and then give a report at that meeting to the CBOC. For example, one report invoice that we looked at was the attorney's invoice. We found the attorney was charging the bond program for legal advice on projects that were not bond program. We also found that the attorney who was in LA was billing the district $400 an hour for driving from Los Angeles to Richmond, California to provide legal advice at the rate of $400 an hour. So these are the kinds of things you can determine if you look at the invoice. So what we recommend is randomly pick 3 invoices. If you saw an invoice for $5,000 to a conference in Las Vegas, I'd take a look at that invoice and understand who went to Las Vegas, what was the purpose, how much money did they spend. So you can easily go down the list of checks and pick out a couple of them and ask the district to give you the backup. Tom, you got a thought on that? You're an auditor.
Well, I generally agree with that. I would say put more of an emphasis on the larger expenditures. And there are ways you can do statistical sampling that the bigger expenditures will have a greater chance to be selected. Just makes sense. However, you find a hell of a lot of things that are snuck in at small levels. One thing that auditors always look for, if there's a limit, anything $5,000 or over needs special approvals. Look for things for $4,900. Particularly when you see 2 or 3 or 4 to the same person for $4,900. So there's a lot of little things that auditors learn over the years, but having a committee that does some independent reviews on a random basis, I think is a very good idea. The problem is, how do you get CBOC members who are going to be that active, given how much they're paid?
Mr. Young here, 4 hours of this amazing presentation is not enough to learn all the most important Proposition 39 bond use details. Does your company offer additional training in regards to independent citizens bond over committee rules and regulation? Yes, we have a lot of material on our website, and as Tom mentioned earlier, we just embarked on an ambitious online video training. These are going to be 10-minute videos that you can get. A 10-minute video on what is Prop 39, a 10-minute video on what is a performance audit. These first 6 videos are going to be designed for new CBOC members or CBOC members who want additional information. After that, we're going to design a 15-minute video on a specific subject. So we'll go into detail on just one subject. What is the role of a CBOC member? What is a good performance audit? What should be on a good annual report, etc. It will have a whole series of those. On our website now, we have over 50 frequently asked questions, such as, what is the compliance opinion that a CBOC is supposed to have in their annual report? So those 50 frequently asked questions are on the website. We have several videos on the website. We have over 50 examples of grand jury reports, audit reports on issues around the state. So there's a lot of information on the website. Our job, our major task is to provide training. We see that as our major focus, to provide independent training to CBOC members. Today, most of the training that a CBOC member is provided for by the district bond counsel or the district attorney. That is the primary place. When you look at the first meeting of a new CBOC, and by the way, there's 87 propositions that are going to be on November. And every district is required, as you know, within 60 days to form the CBOC. If you go on the meeting agenda for those first meetings, and it's the district attorney who is telling the independent CBOC how they're going to operate. And what they love to do is talk about the Brown Act. And they love to tell you, you know, the Brown Act says you can't talk to anybody on the CBOC outside of the CBOC member, which is absolutely wrong. The Brown Act doesn't prohibit you from talking to anybody. You just can't talk to more than a majority on a single item. In other words, you cannot lobby the CBOC a majority for a particular point. But you certainly can talk to any CBOC member outside of the meeting on anything you want to talk about. And you can send all the CBOC members an email. You just can't ask them to respond, because that could possibly be considered a violation of serial meeting. But who is it, the person that trains the first committee? It's the district's lawyer. It's the district's lawyer.
I'll just add one comment. For districts that already have a Prop 39 bond and they have another ballot issue, I really recommend you look strongly at having one CBOC for all Prop 39 ballot measures. It's hard enough to get good people to serve on one committee. If you have 2 or 3 or 4, it gets that much harder.
Here's a good question. So some of the staff from our district is not providing transparent answers to questions from CBOC members for areas the district staff deems as out of the CBOC preview, but is within the expenditures of the bond. Can you comment on some recommendations, remedies to achieve more transparency of CBOC oversights? Well, I think as we discussed before, any citizen can use the California Records Act request to ask any question. I think if the CBOC itself is not getting answers to questions, I think that's the time that maybe the CBOC should have a press conference with your local media and ask those questions at the press conference and indicate that that the district staff is unwilling to provide answers. I know one member in a particular district, they spent $1 million on building a soccer gate. This was an ornamental soccer gate to the soccer stadium. And there was questions whether that was within the scope of the project list. And the district would not give them answers. I know in the case of San Francisco Unified, the district spent bond monies for an attorney to defend the district against covering up a mural in a local high school. And that expenditures was subsequently determined as unauthorized. But if you ultimately, I think your best remedy is going public at board meetings, going public to the press, and pointing out these matters. I think that is the best authority. Absent that, you have to go and initiate a lawsuit.
That's exactly why we put access to records and people as one of our priorities in our legislative program, so that there's specific language that says you got to tell the BOC the answers to the questions that they ask.
I think that's a good place to end, Madam President. I want to just
Okay,
say again, if anybody has any questions now or later, go to the help desk, bondoversight.org. We'll be delighted to help. We're also, if a CBOC would like us to come to their meeting and talk about training, we're delighted to do that. If you have specific issues, we're delighted to help you in any way we can. Carolyn, Madam President, it's your meeting.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda, and this is when I turn it over to Laura Santos, who will be giving the awards. So these would be, we have a CABOC Member of the Year, CABOC of the Year, District of the Year, CABOC Media, and CABOC Person of the Year. So take it on, Laura. But get off mute.
Okay, so I'm really thrilled to be in the presence of the awardees that have gone, the ones that are here today that have gone above and beyond their call of duty, and I'm just honored and thrilled. So the first award goes to CBOC Member of the Year. This is for an active member committed to ensuring the independence of the Bond Oversight Committee. So the winner reached their term limits in August 2018 as a result of efforts of a group of citizens, including the winner. A new CBOC was appointed by the district in May 2021. He was appointed to the new CBOC and served as vice chair and interim chair. He provided leadership to challenge illegal bond expenditures, which he did successfully. He changed the process for appointing CBOC members. He had bylaws drafted to make the CBOC independent, submitted to the public the first annual report since 2019, reviewed prior audits for fiscal years 2020 and 2021, and supported revitalizing the CBOC as an effective bond oversight committee. So that award goes to Rex Ridgway, interim chair of the San Francisco Unified School District Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. I don't know if Rex is with us today, but congratulations. And we'll be sending out the awards. We'll get them since we can't present them today. We'll get them to them after the conference. Okay, the next award goes to CBOC of the Year, and that goes to a committee that advances bond oversight. The winning committee, the district did not appoint a CBOC for 3 years from August 2018 to May 2021. Again, a group of citizens successfully organized a recall of 3 board trustees. A reformed CBOC was appointed in May 2021. Subsequently, the chair of the CBOC was appointed by the mayor as a trustee on the Board of Education. So the CBOC of the Year goes to San Francisco Unified District Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Okay, and then the next award goes to the District of the Year. And this is a district, an open, transparent district that provides support and documentation for its bond oversight committee to carry out its duties in an exemplary fashion. The winning district's Citizens Bond Oversight Committee was created in 2009 as a requirement of the November 4th, 2008 approval by the voters of a $25 million Measure A. The CBOC got involved with this district due to a call from an investigative reporter concerning the CBOC's lack of transparency. Responses to the California Public Record request and regularly scheduled meetings. The CBOC executive director and several board directors started working with a group of concerned citizens and CBOC members, as well as Jeff Napier with the support of the superintendent and board of trustee president. The CBOC website was updated with prior year's agendas and minutes. California Public Record Act requests were answered. Last year's annual report was issued, and regular monthly financial statements were presented, arranging for a site visit and a meeting schedule was established. So this award is presented to Dal Norte Unified School District and Association Superintendent Jeff Napier for their support in making the CBOC transparent and responsive to community concerns. And I know Jeff is here, I believe. I think I saw his name and picture on the Zoom. Okay, then the next award goes to CBOC Media. And the criteria for this is a reporter who has written articles focused on school bond oversight. So this reporter has covered education in California for 22 years, written stories that range from issues facing Bay Area school districts to broader national policy debates. Her work generates changes to state law and spurred political and community action to address local needs. Her article spurred the recall of 3 school board of education trustees and the Reformed Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. So the winner for the CBOC Media is reporter Jill Tucker, K-12 education reporter for San Francisco Chronicle newspaper. Okay, and then the last award goes to the CBOC Person of the Year. This is a person that has contributed to the independent bond oversight. The award winner is the executive director of the California Debt Investment Advisory Commission. That is CDIAC, which provides information, educational, technical assistance on public debt, investment in economic development, financing tools to local agency and public finance professional. It's a state clearinghouse for debt issuance information and compiles data from all municipal debt issuers in California. CDIAC also organizes education seminars on public finance matters, the debt issuance process, and the investment of public funds. During the past year, the winner has supported the California Association of Bond Oversight Committee by providing technical advice on the production of online training videos, grant sources, and statistical data on Proposition 39 bond election and sale of Proposition 39 bonds. So the CBOC Person of the Year, the award goes to Robert Berry, Executive Director of CDIAC. I don't know if any of the awardees are here, but if they are, perhaps they would want to say something. Let's see, let's go through them. Is Rex Ridgway here? I thought I saw him. Rex isn't here? Okay.
Yeah, this is Rex.
Hi, Rex. Do you want to say a few words?
Oh, wow. First of all, thank you. Appreciate all the help that the members of CABOC, Anton and Carol and Marcus Crowley, certainly Tom Rubin, I really had my opportunity to get some real good advice when dealing with the misuse of bond funds for the that was used to pay attorney's fees. So it's been written up in the paper. It actually went to Fox News. It was so egregious that they would use bond funds to do that. And that was pretty much most of my time after taking the chair after Ann Sue was promoted to a board commission of the school district. So I just wanted to say, this award is really a shared award amongst many people. So that's all I want to say, and say thank you so much.
Okay, congratulations. And then, okay, and San Francisco Unified also got the award for the committee of the year. So we'll go on to the district of the year. Is there somebody here for Del Norte Unified today? That might, okay. Oh yeah, Jeff's here. Okay, superintendent. Do you want to say a few words, Jeff? If somebody could unmute him.
Sure. Thank you very much. This is actually, Anton, I think you will attest, after what we were going through with some community members. Anton's guidance and wisdom were phenomenal. He helped me see as a CBO that just are correct and I know everything is good, and that we are protecting taxpayer money. If we cannot put it out to the community in a way that they can understand it, that people will start to question. And I agree with the questions, and Anton helped me realize that agreeing with the questions and agreeing with the tactics are two different things. And I think we're on the right track now. Hopefully this is going to help me with recruitment with our CBOC. And I would like to, our CBOC is part of this award, should be part of this award too. They went through some pretty nasty public meetings, and it's been tough, but thank you so much. And thank you, CABOC, for all the support. And Anton, you a true gentleman and a very wise man. Thank you so much for all your help.
Okay, and we'll be getting your plaques out to you.
Lori, I just want to make one comment. One of the feedback we got from last year's conference was the fact that you guys, you're all negative. You're just saying, oh, what doesn't work, and these guys are bad and they're not doing the job. So this year, this award is the first one that has been awarded. We didn't have this award last year, and I wanted to recognize that. I think going forward, I'd love to see an award for the best annual report, a reward for the best performance audit, because there are good things that are happening. It's not all negative. So this award was trying to speak to some of the evaluation from last year's conference.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then reporter Jill Tucker, she's probably not here today, is she? I don't think so. Okay. And then is Robert Berry here? Probably not. I don't think. Okay. So those are the awards. And like I said, I'm really honored to be able to present them.
Thank you, Laura. It's, congratulations to all our awardees. And I hope you spread the news, or we can spread the news about your accomplishments. But we really appreciate all your efforts, especially considering that we're all looking at improving bond oversight. Okay, so next thing is we're going to be closing today's conference. We do have a survey for you to complete. A link will be sent to you. And for those responding today, we will hold the drawing and the winner will receive a $200 gift certificate. So look forward for that link. Sometimes with all my mails, and I have to admit, sometimes I get a lot of junk mail. Thank God I get separated. But the other way, thank you for attending today's conference. I hope it was informative. Please review our website, bondoversight.org, for information, and have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Maybe